Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into one of medieval Europe's most overlooked industries, the rope maker's yard. Picture this. It's barely dawn, the sky still bruised purple and gray, and you're trudging through mud toward a long, narrow building that stretches so far into the morning mist you can't see the other end. Your hands are already cramping from yesterday's work, and you haven't even touched a fiber yet. The air hits you first, a wall of smell so thick you can taste it. Rotting vegetation mixed with tar, animal fat, and something else you can't quite identify but suspect involves bodily fluids. Welcome to your new job. You probably won't survive this with your health intact, and you'll definitely question every life choice that brought you here. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing the global bedtime crowd roll in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is around 1450, and you've just arrived at a rope walk in Bristol, England. Maybe you're here because your father owed someone money. Maybe the harvest failed and this was the only guild accepting new apprentices. Maybe you just made a series of spectacularly bad decisions. Whatever the reason, you're standing at the entrance to a trade that will reshape your body, ruin your hands, and possibly kill you before you reach 40. The rope yard sits on the outskirts of town, near the docks where the finished products will eventually be sold. It's positioned here deliberately. Rope making requires ridiculous amounts of space and produces enough noise and smell that proper townsfolk don't want it anywhere near their homes. The main building, called the Rope Walk, stretches somewhere between 300 and 400 yards. That's longer than 3 football fields, and you'll be walking every inch of it backward while twisting plant fibers together. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Right now, you're just trying to breathe through your mouth and figure out where to report. A dozen or so workers are already moving through the yard, and you notice immediately that there's a hierarchy as rigid as anything in a noble's court. The master rope makers, there are maybe 2 or 3 of them, wear relatively clean wool jerkins and leather aprons that actually look maintained. They're conferring near a massive wooden wool mechanism, pointing at something and nodding seriously. Below them are the journeymen, maybe 10 of them, identifiable by their stained work clothes and the weary efficiency of their movements. They know what they're doing, but they're doing it for someone else's profit. And then there's you, the apprentice, the lowest creature in this ecosystem. You're wearing whatever rough clothing you showed up in, and you're about to discover it's entirely inadequate for the work ahead. A man approaches, thick-shouldered, somewhere in his 40s, with hands so scarred and calloused they look like they belong to a different species. This is Thomas, one of the journeymen, and he's been assigned to make sure you don't immediately die or destroy anything expensive. He looks you up and down with the enthusiasm of someone evaluating a probably lame horse. "You the new lad?" he asks, though it's not really a question, right? First thing, "You smell that?" You nod, trying not to gag. "You'll stop noticing in a week." Second thing, "See that pile?" He points to a massive heap of what looks like dried plant stalks, brownish gold and tangled. "That's hemp. It's been ret. That means rotted in water until the useful bits separate from the rubbish. That smell you're enjoying? That's ret hemp. You'll be working with it until your hands look like mine." He holds up his palms, and you see what he means. The skin is thick as leather, crossed with white scars, and the fingernails are perpetually blackened. Several fingers sit at odd angles, healed from breaks without proper setting. Thomas leads you past the main rope walk toward a smaller outbuilding. "You don't start on the walk," he explains. "You start in preparation. If you can't prepare fiber properly, you can't make rope worth a damn, and if you can't make rope worth a damn, you don't eat. Master Aldwin runs 3 meals a day for workers, but only if you've met quota. Miss quota, you get bread and water. Miss it 3 days running, you're dismissed. This is the first you're hearing about quotas, and a cold stone settles in your stomach. What's the quota? You manage to ask. Thomas shrugs. Depends what you're assigned. For preparation, usually about 80 pounds of processed fiber per day. Doesn't sound like much until you're doing it. 80 pounds. You try to imagine processing 80 pounds of anything, and your mind balks. The outbuilding is darker than the main yard, lit only by a few narrow windows and the open door. Inside, 3 other workers are already bent over their tasks. One is beating hemp stalks with a wooden mallet against a stone block. The sound is rhythmic and somehow exhausted, like the worker is conserving energy for a marathon rather than sprinting. Another is pulling handfuls of fiber through what looks like a board studded with nails, combing it straight. The third is doing something with water in a large trough, and the smell from that corner makes the outside air seem pleasant by comparison. You'll start with scutching, Thomas says, handing you a wooden paddle-like tool with a blade attached. Take the red hemp, lay it across the scutching board there, and beat it. You're breaking up the woody bits and separating the fibers. The good stuff, the bast fiber, that's what we keep. Everything else is rubbish. He demonstrates, taking a handful of hemp stalks and laying them across a vertical board. With practiced efficiency, he brings the scutching blade down in controlled strikes, and bits of plant matter explode away while long, pale fibers remain caught on the board. After perhaps 30 seconds, he's left with a handful of relatively clean fiber that looks almost like blonde hair. Your turn, he says, stepping back. You take a bundle of hemp and try to mimic his motions. The scutching blade is heavier than it looked. Your first strike is too weak and accomplishes almost nothing. Your second is too hard and in the wrong place, and fibers scatter everywhere. Thomas sighs the sigh of a man who has trained many useless apprentices. Again, he says, you work for what feels like hours but is probably only 30 minutes. Your shoulder starts to burn. Dust fills the air around you. Plant particles that coat your throat and make you cough. Your eyes water. The fiber is stubborn, clinging to its woody core like it knows separating means death. Historians still argue whether medieval rope makers had higher rates of respiratory disease than other laborers, but standing here in this cloud of organic dust, you'd bet money they did. By the time Thomas calls a break, you've processed maybe 3 pounds of fiber, and it's not even processed well. You can see the difference between your pile and what the experienced worker next to you has produced. Yours is inconsistent, with woody bits still attached and fibers of uneven length. His looks almost machine-made in its uniformity. You'll get faster, Thomas says, though he doesn't sound convinced. He hands you a wooden cup of water that tastes vaguely of the barrel it came from. Everyone's rubbish at first. I once saw an apprentice spend his entire first week producing nothing but garbage. Master Aldwin used it to stuff mattresses and docked the boys' wages to cover the loss. This is the economic reality setting in. You're not just learning a trade, you're already in debt. The apprenticeship contract you signed, or your father signed, or whoever sold you into this, includes room and board, but the room is a shared loft above the scutching shed, and the board depends on your productivity. Everything else, tools that break, materials you ruin, time you waste, comes out of your future earnings. A bell rings somewhere in the yard. Breakfast, Thomas says. Come on. The meal is served in a long room attached to the main rope walk. 30 or so workers file in and take places at rough wooden tables. There's a definite order to the seating. Masters at the head, journeymen in the middle, apprentices at the end nearest the door where the draft is worst. The food appears in wooden bowls carried by a woman you'll later learn is Master Aldwin's wife, thick porridge made from oats or barley, flavored with a bit of bacon fat if you're lucky, completely plain if you're not. There's dark bread, hard enough that you have to soften it in the porridge to chew it. There's small beer because the water in 1450s Bristol will kill you faster than the rope work. You eat quickly, partly because you're starving and partly because you notice everyone else is eating quickly. The meal break is maybe 15 minutes, just long enough to shovel food down and stretch your back. A few journeymen are talking quietly about a naval contract. Apparently the yard is competing to supply cordage for the king's ships, and if they win the bid, there will be months of intense work ahead. Master Aldwin himself appears briefly, a prosperous-looking man in his 50s with a fur-trimmed coat that seems absurdly fancy for someone who works in a rope yard. He surveys his workers with the calculating gaze of a man assessing livestock, nods to a few of the senior journeymen, and disappears back into the private office attached to the main building. That's the closest you'll get to him for months. The apprentice next to you whispers. He's maybe 14, thin as a rail, with the haunted look of someone who's been here longer than he'd like. He only deals with journeymen and above. We're furniture to him. The bell rings again. Break over. You file back to the scutching shed, and Thomas is waiting with another massive pile of hemp. 80 pounds, he reminds you. You've done 3. Long day ahead. And he's not wrong. You beat hemp stalks until your arms shake. The repetitive motion creates blisters on your palms that burst and then become new blisters. The dust never settles. Every strike sends up a fresh cloud that coats your sweaty skin until you look like you've been breaded for frying. The worker at the combing station starts coughing around midday, a wet, rattling sound that goes on for 5 minutes, but he doesn't stop working. You learn quickly that stopping means falling behind, and falling behind means no dinner. Lunch is bread and cheese, eaten standing up in the yard. 10 minutes, maybe less. Back to the scutching. Your pile of processed fiber grows with agonizing slowness. By late afternoon, when the light through the narrow windows turns golden and starts to fade, you've processed maybe 40 pounds. You're not even halfway to quota, and your body is screaming. Your shoulders feel like someone's driving nails through them. Your hands are a mess of broken blisters and splinters. Your throat is raw from dust and coughing. Thomas appears as the final bell rings, the day-end bell, signaling that work hours are over. He examines your output with a critical eye, weighing it in his experienced hands. 42 pounds, he announces. Not good enough. Your heart sinks. But, he continues, it's your first day, and about half of it is actually usable. You'll get bread and thin stew tonight. Tomorrow, I expect 50 pounds minimum. By the end of the week, you'd better be hitting 80, or Master Aldwin will have words. The evening meal is indeed bread and thin stew, mostly water with some vegetables and maybe a suggestion of meat. You eat it like it's a feast because you've never been this hungry in your life. Your fellow apprentices eat in exhausted silence. The journeymen are louder, trading jokes and insults with the ease of men who've survived this long enough to find humor in it. After dinner, you climb the ladder to the apprentice loft. It's a low-ceilinged space with straw mattresses laid directly on the floorboards. It smells of sweat and the hemp dust everyone carries in their clothes. You collapse onto an unclaimed mattress, and the straw pokes through the thin fabric, but you're too tired to care. First day? Someone asks from the darkness. Yeah, you manage. Gets easier. The voice says, though it doesn't sound convinced. Sort of. You stop feeling it as much. You want to ask questions. How long have you been here? Is it really 7 years? What happens if you run away? But sleep is already pulling you under. Your last conscious thought is that you've done 1 day. 1 day out of approximately 2,555 days of apprenticeship. You wouldn't last a week in a medieval rope maker's yard, honestly. But you're here now, and tomorrow the hemp will still be waiting. You wake to darkness and the sound of someone ringing a handbell in the yard below. Your body has apparently decided that moving is no longer something it's willing to do. Every muscle protests. Your hands are so stiff you can barely make fists, and when you finally pry your fingers open, you see that the blisters from yesterday have developed a yellowish crust overnight. Lovely. Around you, other apprentices are groaning and shuffling in the darkness. Someone strikes a flint and lights a stub of candle, and in the flickering light you see faces that mirror your own misery. The boy who spoke to you last night, his name is Peter, you learn, is wrapping his hands with strips of rag before heading down the ladder. Helps a bit, he says when he notices you watching. Won't stop the blisters, but keeps them from getting worse as fast. You don't have rags, so you climb down with bare hands and join the procession of workers stumbling toward the yard in the pre-dawn gloom. It's cold this morning, properly cold, and your breath makes clouds in the air. The hemp preparation shed at least has body heat from multiple workers, but it'll be an hour or more before that makes any difference. Thomas is already there, looking disturbingly awake for someone who presumably went through the same brutal day you did yesterday. He's older than you, sure, but not so old that he should be this resilient. It occurs to you that this is what adaptation looks like. The survivors of this industry are the ones whose bodies eventually accepted the abuse and learned to function through it. Right? Thomas says without preamble. Yesterday you learned scutching. Today you're learning heckling. More fun, less dust, different kind of misery. He leads you to the combing station where you saw a worker yesterday pulling hemp through that nail-studded board. Up close, you can see it's more sophisticated than you thought. The tool is called a heckle, and it's basically a bed of progressively finer metal spikes set into a wooden base. The coarsest spikes are at one end, fine as needles at the other. You take your scutched fiber, Thomas demonstrates, holding a handful of the pale hemp you spent yesterday producing, and you pull it through the coarse spikes first, multiple passes. This straightens the fibers and removes any remaining rubbish. Then you move to the finer spikes. By the end, you want fiber that's uniform, straight, and clean enough to spin. He pulls the hemp through with practiced motions, and you watch the transformation. What started as a somewhat messy handful becomes sleek, straight, almost silky. It looks like blonde hair after a very patient combing session. Your turn, Thomas says, handing you a pile of yesterday's scutched hemp. Someone else's work, thankfully, because yours was apparently too poor quality for this step. You grab a handful and approach the heckle. The spikes look sharp, and you quickly discover they are sharp. Your first pull catches awkwardly, and several spikes drag across your palm, leaving red scratches. The fiber tangles instead of straightening. You try again, adjusting your grip, and this time the fiber pulls through but comes out looking barely better than it went in. Too fast, Thomas observes. You're rushing. Slow, steady pulls. Let the spikes do the work. For the next 3 hours, you pull hemp through spikes. Your hands, already damaged from yesterday's scutching, develop an entirely new pattern of injuries. The scratches multiply. The constant gripping and pulling makes your blisters weep fluid that sticks to the hemp. You have to stop periodically to pick fibers out of your wounds, which is exactly as unpleasant as it sounds. The worker next to you, a journeyman named Ralph, is processing fiber at perhaps 5 times your speed. His hands move in a rhythm that seems almost meditative, pull after pull, his pile of finished fiber growing steadily while yours remains pathetically small. He's humming something under his breath, and you realize this is how you survive. You turn your brain off and let your body become a machine that processes hemp. Around mid-morning, something interesting happens. Master Aldwin enters the preparation shed with 2 other men you don't recognize. They're dressed well. One has a chain of office around his neck, and they're clearly here on some kind of inspection. The entire shed's energy shifts. Workers straighten slightly, work more deliberately, become extra aware of their technique. Thomas appears at your elbow and murmurs, "Keep working, but do it right. That's a guild inspector and a naval purchasing agent. They're checking quality for the king's contract. You watch from the corner of your eye as the visitors examine bundles of prepared fiber, holding them up to the light, testing their strength with quick tugs. Master Aldwin is smiling that professional smile of a man trying to close a deal, gesturing expansively and explaining something about their superior preparation methods. The guild inspector picks up a bundle, and you recognize it as one you partially processed yesterday. Your stomach drops. He examines it more closely, frowning. He shows it to the naval agent, pointing at something. They confer in low voices. Master Aldwin's smile becomes slightly fixed. The inspector sets the bundle aside in a separate pile, the reject pile, clearly, and moves on to examine others. After they leave, Master Aldwin storms into the shed. His jolly merchant demeanor has evaporated, replaced by cold fury. Whose work is this? He's holding the rejected bundle. Silence. You consider staying quiet, but Thomas, damn him, has principles. First day apprentice, master. My responsibility for not catching it. Aldwin's eyes fix on you. You. What's your name? You tell him, and he nods slowly, like he's filing it away in a mental ledger of people who've cost him money. That bundle represents 4 hours of work and a half-pound of ruined fiber. Your wages, when you eventually earn any, will be docked accordingly. Thomas, get him off heckling before he costs me the naval contract. Put him on reading preparation. And just like that, your job changes again. Thomas looks apologetic but not sympathetic. There's a difference, as he leads you outside to the redding ponds. Now, let's talk about redding, because this is where the medieval rope-making process gets truly disgusting. Redding is the process of rotting hemp stalks in water until the pectin that binds the fibers to the woody core breaks down. It's controlled decomposition, basically, and it smells like death having a bad day. The redding ponds are located downwind of the main yard, which tells you everything about how pleasant they are. They're shallow rectangular pits lined with clay, filled with stagnant water that's somewhere between green and brown. Hemp stalks are submerged in these ponds for anywhere from 4 to 14 days, depending on temperature and the master's assessment of readiness. The stalks have to stay submerged, so they're weighted down with stones. Your new job is to prepare new stalks for redding. This means taking bundles of dried hemp from the storage shed, stripping off the leaves and seeds, tying them into manageable bundles, and loading them into the ponds. It's physically demanding in a different way than scutching, more about lifting and carrying heavy, awkward bundles, less about repetitive striking motions. The worker you're replacing, a man named John who's being promoted to the scutching shed, gives you about 30 seconds of instruction before gratefully fleeing to his new position. Bundles need to be this size, he says, demonstrating with his hands about 2 feet apart. Tie with that hemp cord. Make sure they're tight. If they come apart in the pond, Master Aldwin will make you fish them out, and trust me, you don't want to put your hands in that water. Stack them by the pond edge. Someone else handles the actual submerging. Then he's gone, and you're alone with several 100 pounds of raw hemp stalks and the worst smell you've encountered yet. The sun is climbing higher now, and the heat is bringing out new dimensions to the redding pond's aroma. It's not just rot. There's a sulfurous note, something that makes you think of eggs left too long in summer heat, mixed with the base note of decaying vegetation. You start bundling hemp. The stalks are rough and leave splinters. The work is monotonous but at least straightforward. Grab armload, lay flat, gather, tie, stack, repeat. Your back starts aching from the constant bending. The rope burns on your palms from tying hundreds of knots add to your collection of injuries. Around you, the rope yard is alive with activity you didn't fully appreciate yesterday. In the main rope walk building, you can hear the creaking of the massive wheels and the calls of workers coordinating their movements. Someone's singing a work song, the lyrics too distant to make out, but the rhythm steady and hypnotic. At the tar heating station, which you haven't been near yet but can smell from here, smoke rises in a thick column. A group of journeymen passes carrying finished rope coiled over their shoulders like massive snakes. The rope is thick as your wrist, and each coil probably weighs 50 pounds or more. They're heading toward the testing area where, you'll learn later, every major rope gets strength tested by hanging weights until the masters are satisfied it'll hold on a ship or in a crane or wherever it's destined. You work through the morning, through the brief lunch break, bread and onions today eaten while standing, and into the afternoon. Your quota for bundling is 200 bundles, and by late afternoon you're only at about 150. You try to move faster, but the hemp seems to fight you. Bundles come luz, not slip. You have to redo work, which eats time you don't have. Peter appears during a water break, looking sympathetic. Reading prep? He asks. You nod miserably. Could be worse, he offers. Could be actually in the ponds doing the submerging and checking. Those workers smell like death itself by day's end, and the water gets in any cut you have. Saw a man get an infection last year that turned his whole arm black. Had to have the barber surgeon take it off. This is not comforting information, but you appreciate that Peter's trying. How long have you been here? You ask. 3 years, Peter says. For more to go if I don't get dismissed or die. He says it matter-of-factly, like he's discussing the weather. Used to be worse. My father's time, apprenticeships were 10 years for rope makers. Guild negotiated it down. 3 years down for to go. You try to imagine 4 years of this and your mind simply refuses. 4 years of blisters and splinters and stink and exhaustion and being shouted at by Master Aldwin. 4 years before you're even a journeyman, able to earn real wages instead of just room and board and occasional pennies. Does anyone ever run away? You ask quietly. Peter's expression darkens. Couple times a year someone tries. Guild sends men after them. Apprentice contracts are binding. Your property until your time's served. They catch you, they bring you back, and Master Aldwin makes an example. Last one got 10 lashes in the yard and 2 years added to his term. He pauses. The one before that they didn't find for 3 months. When they did, he was working in a tannery in London. They dragged him back, and he served his full term plus 5 years extra as punishment. Don't run. Just survive. The bell rings, ending the break. Peter heads back to whatever misery the masters have assigned him, and you return to your bundles. By evening, you've made 180 bundles, 20 short of quota. Thomas comes to inspect your work as the day-end bell rings, and you can see him calculating in his head. Not terrible, he finally says. Bundles are decent quality, but you're short. That's bread and water tonight. Your stomach, which has been rumbling for the past 2 hours in anticipation of dinner, clenches in disappointment. Bread and water while you watch the journeyman eat stew and cheese feels like torture of a specific medieval sort. That evening, sitting at the end of the apprentice table with your bread and cup of water, you watch the masters at the head table. They're eating actual meat, chicken or pork, you can't tell from here, and drinking wine instead of small beer. Master Aldwin is laughing at something, his face red and jovial again now that the day's profits are counted. The economic stratification is so visible you could map it. Masters feast, journeymen eat adequately, apprentices survive on the minimum necessary to keep working. Historians still argue whether the medieval guild system was genuinely beneficial for workers or essentially a form of organized exploitation. Sitting here with your inadequate bread, watching masters who'll never touch hemp themselves grow fat on your labor, you're developing some strong opinions on the matter. After dinner, you drag yourself to the loft. Your hands are somehow worse than yesterday. The new scratches from the heckle have combined with the rope burns from bundling and the still healing blisters from scutching to create a mosaic of pain. You can barely grip the ladder rungs. In the loft, one of the other apprentices, an older boy, maybe 17, is treating his own damaged hands with something from a small clay pot. "What's that?" you ask. "Tallow and herbs," he says. "My mother sent it. Helps a bit with the healing." He considers for a moment, then offers, "Want some?" You nearly weep with gratitude. The salve stings when it hits your open wounds, but then brings a cooling relief. It smells of rosemary and something else you don't recognize. "I'm Jeffrey," the older apprentice says. "Been here 5 years." 5 years. He's more than halfway through. "Does it get better?" you ask, knowing it's a stupid question but needing to ask anyway. Jeffrey is quiet for a long moment. "Your body adapts," he finally says. "First year is hardest. By year 3, you stop feeling most of it. By year 5, he looks at his salve-covered hands. By year 5, you realize you'll never do anything else. Your hands are too ruined for fine work. Your back's too damaged for farming. You're a rope maker for life, whether you meant to be or not. This is the trap, you realize. The apprenticeship isn't just training. It's transformation. By the time you've served your 7 years, you're no longer capable of any other trade. You're molded, broken, and rebuilt into a thing that makes rope. Master Aldwin doesn't just need workers. He needs workers who can't leave. You lie back on your straw mattress and stare at the dark ceiling. Somewhere below, you can hear the night workers, yes, there are night workers, moving through the yard on some task. The rope yard never fully sleeps. There's always hemp soaking, always fiber drying, always something that needs watching. Your second day is done. Only 2,553 days of apprenticeship remaining. But who's counting? The third morning brings rain, and you discover that rain makes everything worse. The preparation shed leaks in a dozen places, creating puddles that mix with hemp dust to form a slippery paste on the floor. The dampness makes the fibers harder to work. They stick together, resist combing, and generally behave like they're conspiring against you. Your hands, which had just started to form the tiniest bit of protective callus overnight, soften again in the moisture and split open anew. But today is different. Today, Thomas appears after the morning meal with an expression that might charitably be called anticipation. "You're going to the walk," he announces. "Your stomach does something complicated. The walk, the actual rope walk where rope gets made, is the heart of the operation. It's also, from what you've gathered from other apprentices' whispered conversations, where the real suffering begins. Preparation work destroys your hands and back. Walk work destroys everything else." You follow Thomas through the rain to the main building. From outside, it's impressive in a purely utilitarian way. A structure that stretches so impossibly far into the distance that the far end disappears into the rain and mist. The building is essentially a very long, very narrow shed with a roof to keep the weather off the rope makers. The sides are open in places for light and ventilation, though today they're mostly closed with temporary wattle screens to keep the rain out. Inside, the space is even more striking. You're standing at one end of what must be a 350-yard covered corridor. The floor is hard-packed earth, smooth from centuries of feet walking backward down its length. Down the center runs a track of wooden posts at regular intervals, and between them, stretching the entire length, are ropes in various stages of completion. Some are thin as your finger, others thick as your thigh. The air thrums with activity. The creak of turning wheels, the shuffle of feet, the occasional shout of "watch your tension" or "coming through." Thomas leads you to a wheel mechanism near the entrance. It's a wooden frame about 6 feet tall with 3 large hooks mounted on a rotating axle. A crank handle allows the operator to spin the hooks, and you can see grooves worn into the wood from years of use. "This is a jack," Thomas explains. "Everything starts here. You'll be working as a jack turner for the next few months, probably." It's entry-level walk work, and it'll teach you the basics of tension and twist. He calls over a journeyman who's currently operating another jack nearby. Ralph, show the new lad how we make a basic laid rope. Start simple, 3-strand, half-inch. Ralph nods and gestures for you to watch. 2 other workers appear, each carrying bundles of prepared hemp fiber, the good stuff, the hecked and combed fiber that looks like pale silk. They begin attaching fiber to Ralph's 3 hooks, building up bundles of fiber on each hook until they're perhaps 2 inches in diameter. Those are the yarns, Thomas says. Well, they will be once we spin them. Watch. Ralph begins turning his crank, and the hooks rotate. As they spin, something magical and mechanical happens simultaneously. The fibers begin twisting together, forming 3 separate twisted cords. But the workers holding the fiber aren't standing still. They're walking backward, slowly, down the length of the rope walk, feeding fiber continuously as they go. The farther back they walk, the longer the twisted cords become. The walk, Thomas says, and you finally understand why it's called that. They'll walk the entire length, spinning out yarn as they go. Takes about 20 minutes for the full walk, depending on thickness and twist. You watch, mesmerized despite your exhaustion. The backward-walking workers move in perfect synchronization, maintaining identical tension on their respective yarns. If one lets their fiber go slack or pulls too tight, the whole operation becomes unbalanced. It's a dance, essentially, performed by people who can't see where they're going. Now, Thomas continues, once they've walked the full length and we've got 3 twisted yarns, that's when it gets interesting. We bring the yarns together and twist them in the opposite direction. The yarns want to twist back on themselves. That tension is what holds the rope together. You're using the fiber's desire to untwist as the binding force. Clever, yeah. You nod, starting to appreciate the physics involved. It's not just twisted fiber. It's controlled opposing forces creating something stronger than the sum of its parts. Your job, Thomas says, bringing you back to reality, is to turn that jack, steady, consistent speed. Not too fast, not too slow. The walkers will shout at you if you mess up their rhythm. And if you create an uneven twist, the rope fails inspection, Master Aldwin loses money, and you lose wages you haven't even earned yet. Questions. You have about 100 questions, but the look on Thomas's face suggests this isn't the time. No, sir. Good. Ralph set him up with something small. 1-strand practice runs until he gets the rhythm. For the next hour, you practice turning a jack loaded with just a single hook and a worker feeding fiber. It sounds simple. It is not simple. The crank has weight and resistance that varies as more fiber gets twisted. You have to maintain a steady speed despite your arms getting tired, despite the monotony, despite everything. Too fast and the fiber twists too tight, becoming stiff and losing flexibility. Too slow and the twist is loose, weak, likely to fail under load. The worker feeding fiber, a journeyman named William, is patient at first. Steady, he calls. Steady. Too fast now, slow down. There, that's it. No, you're slowing down. Keep the pace. By the 5th practice run, his patience is wearing thin. Christ's bones, boy. It's not complicated. Just turn at the same bloody speed. But it is complicated because your arms are burning, your grip is slipping on the crank handle, and the repetitive motion is somehow both boring and demanding intense concentration. You have to count in your head, or hum a rhythm, or find some mental trick to maintain consistency. You try humming the work song you heard yesterday, matching your cranking to its beat, and this actually helps. Around midday, Thomas decides you're minimally competent and assigns you to assist on a reel rope, a 2-inch mooring line for ships. This requires 4 yarns, which means 4 hooks on the jack, which means 4 times the resistance to turn. You're paired with another apprentice on the crank. A boy named Edmund who's been here 6 months and has the rhythm down. You're just supposed to help him turn, adding your strength to his. The 4 walkers set off down the rope walk, moving backward in formation like some kind of synchronized swimming team on dry land. You and Edmund begin cranking. The jack's gears click rhythmically. The yarns twist, gleaming as the fibers catch the light filtering through the roof gaps. It's almost beautiful in a completely exhausting way. "Don't look at the yarns," Edmund mutters. "Look at the walkers. Match their speed. If they slow down, we slow down. If they speed up, we speed up." You try to follow his advice, but the walkers are now 30 yards away and receding. You squint through the dim interior, trying to gauge their pace while simultaneously turning a heavy crank in perfect sync with Edmund. Your shoulders start burning within 5 minutes. 10 minutes, your arms are shaking. 15 minutes, you're fairly certain you're dying. The walkers are now at the far end of the rope walk, nearly invisible in the distance. They've played out hundreds of yards of twisted yarn. Edmund hasn't slowed his pace at all, and you're struggling to keep up. Your hands keep slipping. Your breathing is ragged. Every rotation of the crank feels like lifting something heavier than the last. "Stay with it," Edmund hisses. "If you drop pace now, the whole rope is ruined." You grit your teeth and keep cranking. The work song rhythm helps. You've stopped thinking, stopped feeling anything except the need to maintain the pace. This is what Ralph meant about turning your brain off. You become the machine. You are nothing but a component in the rope-making mechanism, as replaceable and unthinking as the wooden gears. Finally, the walkers reach the end. They secure their fiber and signal completion. You and Edmund stop cranking, and you nearly collapse over the jack. Your arms are trembling uncontrollably. Edmund looks tired but functional, which tells you everything about the gap in your respective conditioning. "First full walk?" Edmund asks, not unkindly. You nod, not trusting yourself to speak. "Gets easier. Sort of." He grins. "Wait until they put you on the closing jack. That's when we take the 4 twisted yarns and twist them together into the final rope. Twice the resistance, same duration. You'll want to die. You're already wanting to die, so this isn't great news." The afternoon brings exactly what Edmund promised: work on the closing jack. This is where the 4 twisted yarns you just created get combined into a single rope. The yarns are attached to a different jack configuration, and now you're twisting them together in the opposite direction from their internal twist. This creates the classic laid rope appearance: 3 or 4 thick strands spiraling around each other. The resistance is immense. Takes 3 apprentices on the crank to turn it, and even then it's brutal work. You're positioned at the front, with Edmund behind you and another boy named Simon at the rear, all of you gripping the same crank handle and pushing in unison. It's like trying to move a millstone, except the millstone fights back and never stops needing to be moved. A journeyman oversees this operation, calling the pace. And push, and push, and push. His voice becomes a metronome that your muscles learn to obey without thought. Your world narrows to that voice, the resistance in your arms, and the small section of rope walk you can see from your position. Halfway through, your grip fails. Your hands are too damaged, too slick with sweat and seepage from your blisters. You lose your hold on the crank, and for a moment the entire operation falters. The other apprentices grunt with effort, compensating for your dropped force. The journeyman's voice cracks like a whip. "Get back on it. Now!" You grab the crank again, ignoring the pain, ignoring the wetness you can feel on your palms that might be blood or blister fluid or both. You push. The crank moves. The rope forms. The walkers at the far end maintain their backward procession, and slowly, agonizingly, another 100 yards of finished rope comes into existence. When it's done, you look at your hands. They're a mess. The crank handle has worn away what little intact skin remained, and several blisters have torn completely open, leaving raw flesh exposed. You're gonna have to grip that crank again tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. Thomas appears with a bucket of water and a rag. Clean them, he says, not unsympathetically. Infection will kill you faster than the work. There's salt in the water. It'll hurt, but it helps. He's not wrong about it hurting. The salt water feels like liquid fire on your exposed flesh. You clean your hands anyway because the alternative is infection, and you remember Peter's story about the man who lost his arm. The evening bell finally rings. You've made it through your first day on the walk. Your arms feel like overcooked meat hanging from your shoulders. Your hands are approaching complete destruction. Your back aches from the hunched position required to push the crank. But you made it. Dinner is determined by quota again, and walk work has different metrics. You were part of teams that produced approximately 400 yards of finished mooring rope. This exceeds the day's target, so everyone who worked the walk gets full rations. Thick stew with actual chunks of meat, bread that's only slightly stale, and small beer that tastes almost good after a day of hard labor. You eat mechanically, too tired to taste anything. Around you, journeymen are discussing tomorrow's work order. Apparently, there's an urgent need for smaller diameter rope, rigging rope for the naval contract. This means different fiber preparation, different yarn thickness, and a faster walking pace. The apprentices exchange grim looks. Faster pace means harder cranking. After dinner, Jeffrey shares his tallow salve again. You apply it liberally, wrapping your hands in the cleanest rags you can find. Peter sits nearby, working on his own hands with a needle, draining blisters that have gotten too large. You'll want to drain the big ones, he advises. Otherwise they pop during work and take half your palm skin with them. Learned that the hard way. This is your life now. Evening medical procedures performed by teenagers on each other because there's no alternative. The barber surgeon costs money, and minor injuries don't qualify for master-funded treatment. You handle your own wounds or you suffer. That night, lying on your straw mattress, you listen to the sounds of the rope walk below. Even now, at night, there's activity. Night crews running special orders, maintenance workers oiling the jacks, someone singing a mournful song in the darkness. The rope yard never fully stops. Historians still argue whether medieval apprentices were better off than their rural peasant counterparts. The apprentices at least had a path to skilled work and guild membership. But peasants got to keep their hands, mostly, and didn't spend their youth walking backward into darkness while turning cranks that destroyed their bodies. You drift towards sleep, and your dreams are filled with the rhythmic click of jack gears and the sensation of walking backward forever, feeding rope into an infinite void. The work song from earlier loops in your mind. And push, and push, and push. 3 days down. Only 2,552 to go. 6 weeks pass in a blur of hemp and pain and the endless backward walk. You've developed calluses on your calluses, and your hands now look disturbingly similar to Thomas's. Thick-skinned, perpetually stained, with fingernails that will probably never be fully clean again. You've learned to wrap them properly before work, to drain blisters before they become debilitating, and to recognize the early signs of infection that require actual medical attention. You've also learned that Master Aldwin charges apprentices for barber surgeon visits, docking future wages that exist only as theoretical concepts in a distant future where you're a journeyman. But 6 weeks in, you're starting to understand the deeper reality of your situation. This isn't just a job, it's indoctrination into a mystery cult. Except the mystery is rope making and the cult is the guild of ropers, stringers, and cordwainers. And like any good cult, they guard their secrets jealously. It starts one morning when you're working the jack for a specialized cable order. Something for a cathedral construction project, apparently requiring specific twist ratios and treatment. You're cranking away, maintaining your rhythm, when you notice Master Aldwin and two journeymen having an intense, hushed conversation near the closing station. They're looking at a piece of parchment, and one of them is demonstrating something with his hands. Some specific motion or technique you can't quite make out. When they notice you watching, the conversation stops immediately. The parchment disappears into Master Aldwin's coat. The journeymen return to work with deliberate casualness. Keep your eyes on your work, boy. One of them calls over, not quite threatening, but not friendly either. At the midday meal, you ask Peter about it. He glances around to make sure no journeymen are in earshot before answering. Guild secrets, he says quietly. Techniques, ratios, treatments, they're not written down except in the master's private books, and they're sure as hell not shared with apprentices until you're close to finishing your term. Some things you'll never learn unless you become a master yourself. But why? You ask. What's the point of hiding how to make rope? Peter looks at you like you've asked why water is wet. Because knowledge is money. Every guild guards its trade secrets. If anyone could make rope properly, there'd be no need for guilds, no way to control prices, no way to ensure quality. The mystery of the craft is what gives it value. Jeffrey, sitting nearby with his fifth-year apprentice privileges of slightly better bread, leans in. It's worse than you think. Every master has his own variations, special treatments for waterproofing, specific fiber blends for different rope types, techniques for making rope that holds better or lasts longer. They pass these secrets to their sons or favored journeymen. Everyone else gets the basics and nothing more. So we're learning just enough to be useful labor, you say slowly, but not enough to be competition. Now you're understanding, Jeffrey says. Why do you think apprenticeships are 7 years? It's not because it takes 7 years to learn rope making. A smart person could learn the mechanics in 6 months. The 7 years is about control. They keep you bound and powerless while they extract labor, and only at the end do they decide whether you're worthy of the real knowledge. This realization sits in your stomach like bad meat. You've known the work was brutal, but you'd assumed it was at least honest, that you were genuinely learning a trade. Now you're understanding that you're being deliberately kept ignorant, taught only what's necessary to make you productive while the actual valuable knowledge remains locked away. The afternoon brings a demonstration of exactly this dynamic. Master Aldwin has agreed to show the journeyman, and only the journeyman, a special waterproofing treatment for naval rope. The apprentices are sent to the preparation sheds to work while this secret knowledge is dispensed to the worthy. You're scutching hemp with Edmund when you hear raised voices from the direction of the main yard. Curious, you both edge toward the door. Through the gap, you can see Master Aldwin standing with a journeyman named Hugh, and the master's face is red with anger. Did I or did I not explicitly instruct you to keep the Stockholm-Tar ratio private? Aldwin's voice carries across the yard. You did, master, but I thought. You thought? You're not paid to think about what knowledge to share. That ratio is worth 50 pounds a year in Navy contracts because no other yard in Bristol can match our waterproofing quality. Hugh's response is quieter, inaudible from your position. But Aldwin's reply makes your blood run cold. I don't care if he's your brother. He works for Merchant Reed's yard now, and anything you tell him goes straight to our competition. One more incident of loose lips and you'll find yourself back to apprentice wages for a year. Are we clear? The message is unmistakable. Knowledge is hoarded, shared only within the hierarchy, and betraying trade secrets brings swift punishment. This isn't a guild. It's a conspiracy of information control. That evening, lying in the loft, you ask Jeffrey the question that's been gnawing at you all day. If they keep the real knowledge secret until the end of the apprenticeship, what happens to the people who don't make it through? The ones who quit or get dismissed? Jeffrey is quiet for a long moment. They've spent years learning just enough rope making to be useless at anything else, but not enough to actually practice the trade. I've heard of former apprentices ending up as day laborers, doing the shit work nobody else wants. Some go to sea as sailors, rope handling skills transfer at least. Some just disappear. Leave town, try to start over somewhere else with no guild connections and no references. That's evil, you say flatly. That's guilds, Jeffrey corrects. Every trade does it. The masons, the goldsmiths, the weavers, they all guard their mysteries. At least rope making doesn't require expensive tools. Try being a dismissed apprentice goldsmith with no money for materials or equipment. The conversation is interrupted by unusual activity below. You hear boots on the ladder, and then Thomas's head appears in the loft entrance, which is unprecedented. Apprentices live in the loft. Journeymen and masters never come up here. You three, he says, pointing at you, Edmund and Peter. Master wants you in his office. Now, the walk to Master Aldwin's office, a small building attached to the main rope walk, is conducted in terrified silence. Being summoned to the master's office is never good. It means either you've done something wrong, or something's about to be demanded of you, or both. Inside, the office is warmer and more comfortable than anywhere you've been in 6 weeks. There's an actual fireplace with actual fire, glazed windows instead of shutters, and furniture that looks like it was made for humans rather than assembled from scrap. Master Aldwin sits behind a desk covered in parchments, his face unreadable. Gentlemen, he begins, and the formal address is somehow more frightening than shouting would be. We have a problem. The cathedral contract requires 200 yards of specialized bell rope by week's end. It's a complex order, specific twist, specific treatment, specific breaking strength requirements. I'm shorthanded because 3 journeymen are sick with the flux. He pauses, letting this information settle. You have no idea where this is going, but your stomach is already knotting with dread. I need the 3 of you to work night shifts this week, Aldwin continues. You'll assist Ralph and William on the specialized walk. You'll learn techniques that are normally reserved for late-stage apprentices. In exchange, you'll each receive 1 shilling bonus at week's end, and you'll keep absolutely silent about what you learn. If I hear even a whisper of the methods used reaching other apprentices or, God forbid, other yards, I'll have you dismissed and blacklisted from every guild in Bristol. Am I perfectly clear? A shilling is more money than you've seen in 6 weeks. It's also a trap. You're being offered a glimpse of the secret knowledge, but on terms that bind you even more tightly to silence and obedience. Refuse, and you've insulted the master. Accept, and you become complicit in the information hoarding that defines the system. Yes, master. You all mumble in unison. Excellent. Report to the walk at sunset. Bring rags for your hands. This work is more delicate than you're accustomed to, and I can't have you bleeding on the fiber. And that's it. You're dismissed. Outside, the 3 of you exchange glances that mix excitement with cynicism. Edmund speaks first. A shilling, he says wonderingly. I could send that home to my family. My sister needs. It's guilt money, Peter interrupts. He's paying us to be complicit in keeping other apprentices ignorant. Don't you see? We learn something valuable, we get paid for silence, and suddenly we're invested in the same system that's been exploiting us. I don't care, Edmund says. My family needs the money, and I need to learn this trade properly if I'm ever going to survive as a journeyman. You can have your principles, Peter. I'm choosing practical survival. You say nothing because both of them are right, and that's the genius of the trap. Sunset comes too quickly. You report to the rope walk with your hands freshly wrapped and your body already exhausted from the day's regular work. Ralph and William are waiting with bundles of unusual fiber. Not the standard hemp you've been working with, but something finer, paler, almost silky. Italian hemp, Ralph explains, costs 3 times what English hemp does, but for bell ropes, it's worth it. Won't fray as quickly when the ropes are running through pulleys day after day. The night's work reveals a completely different level of rope making. Where standard rope is about strength and basic durability, this specialized work is about precision. The twist ratios are measured carefully. Ralph has a small marked gauge he uses to check every few yards. The walking pace is slower, more controlled. The fiber is treated with a compound that William calls the Master Special Mix. You catch glimpses of what might be linseed oil, beeswax, and something else you can't identify. Watch the walking technique. William instructs as he begins his backward walk. His feet move differently than you've seen before, smaller steps, more weight on the balls of his feet, maintaining absolutely level height as he moves. For quality rope, you can't bob up and down. Any variation in height creates variation in tension, which creates weak points. You take your turn at the jack, cranking with deliberate slowness while Edmund and Peter feed fiber with unprecedented care. Every few minutes, Ralph stops everything to check the twist, occasionally making minute adjustments. This single rope takes 3 times as long to produce as standard rope, and you begin to understand why it commands premium prices. Around midnight, during a brief rest, William shares something that feels like genuine trade knowledge rather than basic instruction. Bell ropes take more abuse than any other rope type except maybe ship cables, he says. They're accelerating and decelerating constantly, running over pulleys, getting handled by ringers who don't always know what they're doing. A weak rope means a dropped bell, and a dropped bell can kill someone or destroy the tower. So we build in redundancy. He shows you a section of the rope you're making. See how we're doing 4-strand instead of 3? See this tighter twist ratio? This rope has probably 20% more strength than it needs for the weight it'll carry. That extra strength is insurance against wear, against unexpected shock loads, against human error. It's the difference between a rope that lasts 5 years and one that lasts 20. This is real knowledge. This is the kind of information that would let you make genuinely good rope, the kind that builds reputations and wins contracts. And you're being trusted with it because Master Aldwin is desperate and short-handed, and because he's bought your silence with a shilling. The night wears on. You produce perhaps 50 yards of bell rope, working in shifts because the precision required is exhausting. Your hands, despite the wrapping, still take damage, different damage than usual, from the finer fiber and the need for more delicate handling. Around 3 a.m., delirious with exhaustion, you understand something fundamental about the apprentice system. The brutality isn't accidental. The pain, the long hours, the deliberate withholding of knowledge. It's all designed to break you down and rebuild you in the guild's image. The apprentices who survive are the ones who learn to accept the hierarchy, to value the secret knowledge they're eventually granted, to become gatekeepers themselves once they have something to protect. The system perpetuates because the survivors have suffered too much to want it to change. If the knowledge they struggled for becomes common, their suffering loses meaning. Dawn is breaking when you finish the night's quota. Master Aldwin appears, surprisingly alert for the early hour, to inspect the work. He examines every yard, checking twist and testing strength by hanging his full weight from sections. Finally, he nods. Acceptable. Better than acceptable, actually. Well done, gentlemen. He produces 3 shillings from his purse and hands them over. The silver coins feel heavy in your palm, heavy with both promise and compromise. Remember your oaths of silence, he adds, his jovial tone not quite masking the threat beneath. This knowledge stays within these walls. Dismissed. You stumble back to the loft as the day shift is waking. Your body is running on nothing but determination and the ghost of energy. You have perhaps 2 hours before the morning bell rings and regular work begins. 2 hours to sleep off a 12-hour day followed by a 7-hour night shift. As you collapse onto your straw mattress, Jeffrey looks over from his pallet. He sees the exhaustion in your face, the careful way you're holding your hands, and he knows. "Night work?" he asks quietly. You nod. "What did you learn?" You think about the shilling in your pocket, about Master Aldwin's warning, about Edmund's family needing money, about Peter's principles, about your own desperate need to survive this apprenticeship and learn enough to eventually earn a real living. "Can't say," you finally answer. "Guild secrets." Jeffrey smiles, but it's a sad smile. "Then you're truly one of us now. Welcome to the conspiracy." You close your eyes, but sleep won't come easily. You've crossed a threshold tonight. You've been given a glimpse of the real knowledge, and in accepting it, you've become complicit in keeping it from others. The Guild has made you an accomplice in your own exploitation. Historians still argue whether medieval guilds were primarily about maintaining quality standards or about creating monopolies and restricting competition. Lying here with your shilling and your secrets and your ruined hands, you know which side of that debate you'd support. The morning bell will ring soon. There will be hemp to process, jacks to turn, rope to make. The work never stops. Neither does the slow transformation of apprentices into gatekeepers, victims into enforcers, the exploited into the exploiters. You're 6 weeks into 7 years. You have a shilling and some secret knowledge and the growing certainty that this system is designed not to train you but to trap you. And there's not a damn thing you can do about it except survive one more day, and then another, until either you're broken or you're transformed into someone who believes the breaking was necessary. The bell rings. Time to make rope. 3 months into your apprenticeship, you're introduced to what the journeymen darkly call the preservation station. And within 15 minutes you understand why they speak of it with the same tone reserved for discussing plague ships or tax collectors. The preservation station is where finished rope gets treated with various substances to make it waterproof, rot-resistant, and suitable for its intended purpose. It's also where you're about to discover that medieval chemistry was essentially controlled poisoning, and you're both the chemist and the test subject. The station sits in its own separate shed, downwind from everything else, which should have been your first warning. The second warning is the smell that hits you 50 feet before you reach the door. A combination of burning pitch, rancid fat, and something that makes your eyes water instantly. The third warning is the way Thomas looks genuinely apologetic when he tells you this is your new assignment. "You'll be working with John the Tarrer," Thomas says, using the nickname everyone applies to the preservation specialist. He's particular about his methods. Try not to argue with him. Try not to spill anything on yourself. And for God's sake, don't breathe the fumes directly if you can help it. John the Tarrer turns out to be a man in his late 30s who looks 60. His face is a landscape of burn scars. His hands are stained permanently black, and he's missing 2 fingers on his left hand. He greets you with a grunt and immediately hands you a long wooden paddle. "You're on the tar kettle," he announces. "See that?" He points to a large iron cauldron suspended over a fire pit. The contents are bubbling ominously, black as night and thick as porridge. That's Stockholm tar, pine resin, and tallow. Your job is to stir it constantly. Stop stirring, it burns. Burns, it's ruined. Ruin it, you pay for it. A kettle this size costs 2 weeks of a journeyman's wages. Questions? You have many questions, starting with, is this going to kill me? But you sense this isn't the moment. You take the paddle and begin stirring. The heat from the fire is intense. Within minutes, your face feels sunburned. The fumes rising from the kettle make your throat close up and your eyes stream. You try to breathe shallowly through your mouth, but that just means you can taste the fumes instead of just smelling them. "Faster," John barks. "You want it mixed smooth. Any lumps and the rope treatment's uneven. Uneven treatment means weak spots. Weak spots mean failed inspections. Keep stirring. Your arms, still recovering from this morning's jack work, begin to protest almost immediately. The paddle is heavy, the tar is thick, and the constant circular motion required to keep it properly mixed is its own special torture. You stir and stir and stir, watching the black mixture swirl in hypnotic patterns. After perhaps 20 minutes, John deems the mixture ready. He uses a hooked pole to pull a length of finished rope from a soaking trough. It's been wetted to help the preservation mixture penetrate, and feeds it into the tar kettle. Your job now becomes even more specialized. You have to ensure the rope passes through the mixture evenly, getting coated on all sides, while simultaneously continuing to stir around it. The rope emerges from the kettle black and dripping. John feeds it through a wringer mechanism, 2 wooden rollers that squeeze out the excess, and then hangs it on racks to dry. The whole process has to be done smoothly, continuously, because stopping means the rope in the kettle starts absorbing too much mixture and becomes stiff and unusable. Again, John says, feeding another length of rope into the kettle. You work through the morning processing naval cordage, thick rope destined for the royal ships being built in Bristol's harbor. The tar mixture coats everything. Your hands, your arms up to the elbows despite your best efforts. Your clothes, your face where you've wiped sweat. Your eyes burn continuously. Your throat feels raw. The fumes are making you lightheaded, and twice you have to step outside to breathe clean air and vomit into the weeds. You'll get used to it, John says without sympathy when you return the second time. Took me a month before I stopped puking. Took 6 months before I stopped getting the headaches. Now I only smell it in my dreams. This is not reassuring. You return to stirring, and John begins preparing another mixture in a second, smaller pot. This one smells different. Still terrible, but differently terrible. You catch notes of fish oil, something sulfurous, and herbs you can't identify. Herring oil and sulfur mix, John explains, noticing your attention, for rope that won't be fully submerged but needs weather resistance. The sulfur keeps insects from eating it. The fish oil keeps it flexible in cold weather. Master Aldwin's own recipe. Don't even think about sharing it. There it is again, the constant refrain of guild secrecy. Even methods for poisoning yourself with chemical fumes are proprietary information. Around midday, disaster strikes. You're stirring the tar kettle, tired and unfocused, when your paddle catches on something. Maybe a bit of debris, maybe just the thick mixture resisting, and jerks in your hands. You compensate too hard. The paddle swings wide, and a glob of boiling tar splashes out of the kettle onto your forearm. The pain is instantaneous and extraordinary. The tar is well over 300 degrees, and it sticks to your skin like it was designed to. You scream and stumble backward, instinct telling you to get away from the heat even though the heat is now attached to you. John moves faster than you'd think possible for someone his age. He grabs your arm, plunges it into a barrel of cold water, and holds it there while you gasp and curse and try not to pass out. The water does nothing for the pain. The tar has already done its damage, but at least it stops the burning from continuing. After a minute that feels like an hour, John pulls your arm out and examines it. A patch of skin the size of a large coin has turned angry red, already blistering. The tar is still stuck to it, black and malevolent. You're lucky, John says flatly. That's a minor burn. Minor burns you work through. Major burns. You're useless for weeks and Master Aldwin sends you home without pay. He produces a jar of something greenish and begins smearing it on the burn. It stings ferociously at first, then brings a cooling numbness. Comfrey and mutton fat, he explains. Keeps infection down, helps with healing. You'll want to clean it twice daily and reapply. And wrap it before work tomorrow or you'll get tar in the wound, which I promise you don't want. Tomorrow? You manage to say through gritted teeth. Tomorrow, you think a little burn earns you a day off? I've got 3 fingers missing and I'm here every day. You've got all your fingers. Keep stirring. And incredibly, impossibly, that's exactly what you do. You return to the tar kettle, burning arm and all, and continue stirring because the alternative is being sent home without pay, which means breaching your apprentice contract, which means legal consequences you can't afford. The afternoon introduces you to other preservation methods, each with their own unique ways of destroying your body. There's hot tallow treatment, which involves dunking rope in rendered animal fat heated just below combustion temperature. The smell of this is somehow worse than the tar. There's lye soaking, which uses a caustic solution that can eat through skin given enough exposure. You're given leather gloves for this, but they have holes, and the lye finds the holes with unerring accuracy. The lye bath is for cleaning rope before treatment. John explains as you use a long pole to agitate rope in a trough of the stuff. Gets out any dirt, any oils from handling. Creates a clean surface for the preservation mixtures to bond with. But you've got to be careful. Lye will eat through anything organic given time, including you. You're being very careful, but careful isn't always enough when you're exhausted and working with hazardous materials. A splash of lye hits your cheek. The burning sensation is immediate but different from the tar, more of a dissolving feeling, like your skin is being eaten. You drop the pole and lunge for the clean water barrel, splashing your face frantically. John appears with a rag soaked in vinegar. This neutralizes it. Hold still. He wipes your cheek, and the acid smell of vinegar combines with everything else to make you gag again. You're building up quite a collection of scars for your first day. Try to keep the rest of your skin intact. Yeah. By evening, you're a casualty report waiting to be filed. Your forearm sports an angry burn wrapped in comfort-soaked rags. Your cheek has a red patch where the lye touched it. Your hands, already damaged from weeks of rope work, have new chemical burns from various substances. Your lungs feel coated with tar fumes. Your head pounds from the toxic vapors you've been breathing all day. Dinner is a blur. You eat mechanically, tasting nothing, your mind focused on simply surviving the walk back to the loft. The other apprentices look at your injuries with recognition. They've all been there in various ways. Edmund shows you his own collection of preservation-related scars. A puckered burn on his shoulder from hot tallow, a white patch on his hand where lye once ate through 3 layers of skin, a constellation of smaller burns up both arms. Preservation work is how you know you're truly committed, Edmund says quietly. It's one thing to accept hard physical labor. It's another to accept being slowly poisoned and burned for a trade. The ones who can't handle it usually quit within the first week of preservation training. How long does the training last? You ask, dreading the answer. 6 months. Peter answers from across the table. 6 months of rotating through preservation work, learning all the different treatments, all the different mixtures. Then they cycle you back to the walk or the preparation sheds for a while to let your body recover. Then back to preservation. The cycle continues for your entire apprenticeship. 6 months. You've done 1 day and you're already half destroyed. The mathematics of survival suddenly seem impossible. That night, Jeffrey shares not just his salve but also a small flask of something alcoholic. Drink, he instructs. It'll help you sleep through the pain. You drink. It tastes like someone distilled anger and regret, but it does help. The edges of your pain blur slightly, becoming more manageable. Around you, other apprentices are performing their own evening medical rituals. Peter is draining new blisters. Edmund is treating a rope burn on his calf. Simon is wrapping cracked ribs from an accident on the walk yesterday. This is the reality of apprenticeship that the guild recruitment speeches never mention. It's not just learning a trade. It's systematic destruction of your body in exchange for knowledge and eventual guild membership. Every scar is an investment in your future, Every injury a payment toward the privilege of someday making rope for your own profit instead of Master Aldwin's. Does it ever stop hurting? You ask Jeffrey quietly. He considers this seriously. The acute pain stops. The burns heal, the blisters callus over, the chemical burns scar and toughen. But there's a baseline level of discomfort you learn to live with. Your hands always ache a little. Your back always feels stiff. Your lungs never quite work as well after months of breathing tar fumes. You stop noticing it the same way you stop noticing your breathing. That's horrifying, you say. That's craft, Jeffrey corrects. Every trade has its price. Blacksmiths go deaf from hammer strikes. Masons develop lung disease from stone dust. Tanners are poisoned by the chemicals they use. We lose our hands and lungs to rope. At least rope doesn't kill you quickly. This is medieval occupational health and safety. Accept that the work will destroy you and be grateful it's doing it slowly. The next morning, you return to the preservation station. Your burn has stiffened overnight, the blistered skin tight and painful. John takes one look at it, nods approval at your wrapping job, and hands you the stirring paddle. Back to the tar kettle. We've got a rush order. 300 yards of naval rope by week's end. Means long days in the fumes. Try not to burn yourself again. You stir tar. The fumes make you dizzy. The heat bakes your face. The repetitive motion pulls at your burn, and you can feel the wound weeping beneath the bandages. You stir and stir and stir, your mind drifting in and out of focus. Around midday, you notice John treating a batch of rope with something you haven't seen before. A dark reddish mixture that smells vaguely metallic. When he catches you watching, he hesitates, then apparently decides you're deep enough into the system to be trusted with this knowledge. Red lead oxide, he says quietly, mixed with linseed oil, makes rope resistant to rot in salt water. Also makes it last 3 times longer than standard treatment. Also costs a fortune, which is why we only use it for premium naval contracts. And also, he adds significantly, it's poisonous as hell. The lead accumulates in your body over time. Makes you sick, makes you weak, eventually makes you mad. I've been working with it for 15 years. I'll probably drop dead before I'm 50. He says this matter-of-factly, like he's describing the weather. Why do you keep working with it if you know it's killing you? John looks at you like you've asked why water is wet. Because it's my job. Because Master Aldwin pays me extra for working with the dangerous materials. Because I've got a wife and 4 children who need feeding. Because I'm 42 years old with no other trade and hands too damaged for anything but rope work. What else am I going to do? This is the trap in its final form. Not just the apprentice contract binding you to years of service, but the slow accumulation of damage that makes you unfit for any other work. By the time you're skilled enough to potentially leave, you're too broken to do anything else. The guild doesn't just train you. It makes you dependent on the only work your ruined body can still perform. You return to stirring, but the motion feels different now. Each rotation of the paddle is another breath of toxic fumes, another moment of heat damage, another small deposit in the injury bank that will eventually leave you as scarred and doomed as John the Tar. You're not learning a trade. You're being slowly transformed into a creature that can survive in this chemical hell because it has no other choice. Historians still argue whether medieval workers had more autonomy than modern ones, whether the guild system represented worker power or merely a different form of exploitation. Standing here in a cloud of tar fumes with lead oxide seeping into your bloodstream and burns layering across your skin, you think you could contribute significantly to that scholarly debate. The afternoon brings more rope treatment, more chemicals, more small injuries. By the time the evening bell rings, you've added 2 new burns and a chemical splash to your collection. Your body is becoming a map of your education. Each scar a lesson in what happens when you're careless, unlucky, or simply present in a dangerous environment for too long. That evening, Master Aldwin makes a rare appearance in the dining hall. He's in an expansive mood. Apparently, the naval contract has been confirmed, and there will be months of intensive work ahead. He raises his cup in a toast. "To the finest rope makers in Bristol," he announces. "To fair wages, honest work, and the mysteries of our ancient craft." The journeymen cheer dutifully. The masters smile their prosperous smiles. The apprentices, sitting at the far end of the table with your burns and your chemical poisoning and your ruined hands, say nothing. You're learning the mysteries, all right. You're learning that the mystery is how anyone survives this long enough to become a master themselves. One day down in preservation training. Approximately 179 days to go in this rotation. Your body is already a chemical battlefield. The work will continue tomorrow and the day after and the day after that, because the rope must be made and the rope must be treated, and your suffering is simply the cost of doing business in medieval England. You finish your thin stew and climb to the loft, where Geoffrey shares his salve and his flask and his weary wisdom. Tomorrow you'll return to the tar kettle. Your body will endure more damage. The fumes will steal more of your breath. The chemicals will sink deeper into your flesh. And somewhere, in a comfortable office, Master Aldwin will count his profits and toast to the ancient mysteries of the craft, never once placing his own hands in the tar. For months into your apprenticeship, you witness your first serious accident, and it recalibrates your entire understanding of what dangerous work actually means. You'd thought the preservation station was the peak of occupational hazard, and it's certainly trying its best to poison you slowly, but it turns out that slow poisoning is almost preferable to the sudden, catastrophic injuries that the rope walk itself can inflict when things go wrong. It's a Tuesday morning, unremarkable in every way. You're back on the main walk after a brutal month in preservation, and your lungs are grateful even if your arms aren't. You're working as part of a team laying a massive cable, 2 inches thick, destined for a crane at the harbor. This requires 8 workers, 4 on the walk feeding fiber, 3 on the closing jack, and 1 supervising the lay to ensure tension stays even. The supervising journeyman today is William, the same one who taught you about bell rope during that night shift months ago. He's experienced, careful, respected by everyone, which makes what happens next all the more horrible. The cable is nearly complete, maybe 50 yards left to close, when you hear it. A sound like a bowstring snapping, except louder, sharper, with a musical quality that would be beautiful if it weren't terrifying. One of the yarns has broken under tension. Everything happens in the space of a heartbeat. The broken yarn whips backward with all the stored energy of 300 yards of twisted hemp under load. It catches William across the chest and face, the force of it lifting him off his feet and throwing him backward into one of the support posts. The crack of his body hitting wood is audible even over the sudden chaos of shouting voices. Time does something strange. You're aware of dropping your position at the jack, of running toward William, of other workers converging from all directions. But it all feels slow, underwater, inevitable. William is lying crumpled at the base of the post, and even from 10 feet away you can see the damage. The yarn has laid his face open from temple to jaw, a line of red that looks too bright, too liquid to be real. His chest armor of leather jerkin is torn, and there's blood soaking through. Thomas reaches him first, followed by Master Aldwin, who's appeared from nowhere with the speed of a man protecting his investment. "Get the barber surgeon." Aldwin snaps at one apprentice. "You fetch clean cloth. You bring water. Move." You're frozen, staring, your mind trying to process what you've just seen. One moment William was standing, calling instructions, alive. The next he's bleeding on the floor because a yarn broke. A yarn. The same thing you've been twisting and laying for months, reduced to thinking of it as nothing more threatening than plant fiber. Don't just stand there. Thomas grabs your shoulder. Help me get him to the medical room. The medical room is a small space off the main office, barely more than a closet with a cot. You and Thomas carry William there, trying to be gentle, trying not to look at his ruined face. He's unconscious, which is probably a mercy. The blood is everywhere, on your hands, on Thomas's jerkin, pooling on the floor. The barber surgeon arrives within 15 minutes, which feels like 15 hours. He's a busy man named Robert who serves most of the craftsmen in this part of Bristol. And the expression on his face when he sees William tells you everything you need to know about the prognosis. He cleans the wound, stitches what can be stitched, and wraps William's head in layers of linen that immediately start spotting with blood. Will he live? Master Aldwin asks. It's the question of profit, not compassion. A dead journeyman is an insurance payout and a recruitment problem. An injured journeyman is a temporary setback. Maybe, Robert says, if infection doesn't set in, if his skull isn't fractured, I can't tell yet. If he survives the next 3 days, his chances improve considerably. And if he survives, will he work again? Robert looks at Aldwin with something like contempt. His face is destroyed, his chest is badly bruised, and he may have internal injuries. If he survives, he'll be lucky to walk properly, much less perform skilled labor. I'd say his rope-making days are finished. This is William's life being discussed. A man you've worked beside, learned from, respected, reduced to an assessment of his future economic productivity. Master Aldwin nods slowly, calculating. You can practically see him working out the numbers. Insurance, replacement training, potential guild fines for unsafe conditions. Patch him up as best you can, Aldwin says finally. Send the bill to my office. Then the master turns to address the workers who've gathered anxiously outside the medical room. Back to work, all of you. The cable order still needs to be completed. We've lost time already. There's a moment of shocked silence. Thomas speaks up, his voice tight with anger he's barely controlling. Master, with respect, we've just seen a man nearly killed. The workers need to complete the order on time or we lose the contract. Aldwin interrupts. William would understand that. Accidents happen. We mourn, we learn, we continue. Back to your stations. And incredibly, impossibly, everyone obeys. Because what's the alternative? Refusing means dismissal, and dismissal means no income, no guild membership, no future in the trade. So you return to the rope walk, step over the blood that's already being mopped up by an apprentice assigned to cleaning duty, and resume making the cable that just tried to kill someone. The rest of the day has a surreal quality. You're going through the motions, turning the jack, feeding fiber, maintaining tension, but your mind is elsewhere, replaying that whip crack sound, the image of William airborne, the impossible amount of blood. You're also newly aware of the yarn you're creating. This twisted plant fiber, under the right conditions, stores enough energy to snap bones, tear flesh, kill. At the evening meal, the mood is subdued. William's accident is the elephant at every table, unspoken but omnipresent. Finally, Jeffrey breaks the silence. That's the third serious injury this year, he says quietly. Remember the apprentice who got his hand caught in the closing jack? Lost 3 fingers. And the worker who got tangled in loose rope and got dragged 30 yards before they could stop the mechanism. Broke his leg in 4 places. How many workers has this yard killed? You ask. It's a question that's been building in your mind for months. Jeffrey shrugs. Since I've been here, 2 deaths, maybe a dozen serious injuries. But Master Aldwin's records only show 1 death. The other one was ruled natural causes, even though everyone knows the man died from breathing preservation fumes for 20 years. Peter leans in, speaking even more quietly. My father worked yards in London. He said the guild keeps injury statistics secret because if people knew the real numbers, recruitment would be impossible. Every yard has its casualties. It's just the cost of the trade. That's insane, you say. If we knew. We do know, Edmund interrupts. We all know. You think we're blind? We see the injuries. We hear about the deaths. But what are we going to do? Refuse to work? There's no other option for most of us. This or starving. Those are the choices. This is the economic coercion at its purest. The danger is known, acknowledged, visible in every scar and missing finger and William-shaped absence. But the alternative to accepting the danger is worse, so everyone accepts it and returns to work and hopes their luck holds. The next morning brings a guild inspection. This is apparently standard procedure after a serious accident. An inspector comes to verify that the yard wasn't violating safety protocols and that the accident was, in the guild's lovely phrasing, an act of God and unavoidable misfortune rather than negligence. The inspector is a master rope maker from another yard, a man named Oswald with 30 years in the trade and the scars to prove it. He examines the broken yarn, tests the remaining cable, interviews workers. You're pulled aside for questioning, and you tell the truth. The yarn just snapped, no warning, no obvious defect. Oswald nods, making notes on a wax tablet. How old was the yarn? You don't know. Thomas, standing nearby, answers. Fresh made that morning. Standard 4-strand lay, Italian hemp, proper twist ratio. Any known defects in the fiber batch? None. We processed it ourselves from inspected stock. Oswald continues his questioning, and you start to see what's happening. He's not trying to find out what went wrong. He's building a case that nothing was wrong, that this was simply bad luck, an unavoidable tragedy. Every question is designed to establish that Master Aldwin followed proper procedures, used quality materials, and can't be held responsible. By afternoon, Oswald delivers his verdict in Master Aldwin's office, but word spreads quickly through the yard. Act of God. No guild violation found. Accident deemed unavoidable misfortune inherent to the craft. This is medieval workplace safety. If you can't prove negligence, it's not negligence. The guild protects the masters protect their profits, and the workers absorb the risk because they have no choice. William dies on the 4th day. Infection, the barber surgeon reports. Despite the cleaning, despite the stitching, despite everything, something got into the wound and poisoned his blood. He developed a fever on day 3, became delirious, and by day 4 his body simply gave up. The funeral is quick and grim. William's body is wrapped in, and there's a bitter irony here, rope. Good rope, at least. Master Aldwin provides it free of charge, which is decent of him, you suppose, though you can't help thinking it's the least he could do. The grave is in the parish cemetery, marked with a simple wooden cross. William was 32 years old. He was saving to become a master, Thomas says quietly at the graveside. Another 3 years, he'd have had enough to buy into the guild. Had his eye on a small yard near the docks. Was going to marry. He pauses. All gone because a yarn broke. The yard resumes normal operations the next day. William's position is filled by promoting a senior apprentice to temporary journeyman status. A carrot dangled to keep apprentices motivated. His tools are cleaned and redistributed. His space at the dinner table remains empty for perhaps 3 days before someone else takes it. Within a week, it's like he was never there. Except in your nightmares. You dream about the whip-crack sound, about yarns that break and lash out like vipers, about your own face laid open by forces you've been working with for months without truly respecting them. You wake in cold sweat, staring at the dark ceiling of the loft, listening to other apprentices breathe, wondering which of you will be next. The accident changes something in you. You're more careful now, almost obsessively so. You check yarn tension constantly. You give the closing jacks wider berth. You flinch at sudden sounds. Thomas notices and initially mistakes your caution for cowardice. "You can't work scared," he says one morning. "Fear makes you hesitant. Hesitation causes mistakes. Mistakes cause accidents. You've got to respect the danger, but not let it paralyze you." But how do you do that? How do you maintain respect without fear when you've seen what happens when the forces you're working with decide to betray you? The rope itself is dangerous, not because it's malicious, but because it stores tremendous energy and can release it catastrophically if something fails. Every yarn under tension is a potential weapon. Every cable you create could be the one that breaks and kills someone. Historians still argue whether pre-industrial work was more or less dangerous than factory work that came later. The factory workers had machines that could be even more deadly, but at least there were, eventually, some safety regulations, some accountability. In 1450s Bristol, you have neither. You have only the guild's self-interest in maintaining enough workers to be profitable, balanced against their equally strong interest in minimizing costs and maximizing productivity. 2 weeks after William's death, you're back on the closing jack when you hear that sound again, the high-pitched stress note of fiber under too much tension. Everything in you screams to drop the crank and run. But Edmund is beside you, and Peter is opposite, and Thomas is supervising, and the work must continue. So you hold your position, you keep cranking, and you pray to saints you're not sure you believe in that the yarn holds. It does, this time, but the sound haunts you for the rest of the day. That evening, you ask Geoffrey the question that's been eating at you. How do you live with it? Knowing that any day could be the day something breaks and kills you. Geoffrey is quiet for a long time. "You don't think about it," he finally says. "You can't think about it or you'll go mad. You focus on the immediate, this rope, this shift, this day. You trust your training, you trust your materials, and you trust your luck. And you accept that someday your luck might run out. But until then, you've got to eat. That's not living, you say. That's just surviving." "Welcome to medieval working life," Geoffrey replies. "For most of us, they're the same thing." The months continue. You witness 2 more serious injuries. A crushed foot when a coil of rope shifts unexpectedly, and a worker who gets rope burned so severe it becomes infected and costs him his left hand to the barber surgeon's saw. You learn to recognize the sounds that mean danger. The creak of overstressed wood, the ping of fiber about to fail, the change in tension that means something's wrong. You also learn that complaining about safety gets you labeled as troublesome. When an apprentice named Martin suggests maybe using thicker support posts, he's assigned to preservation work for a month as punishment. When a journeyman named Hugh refuses to work on a jack that looks unstable, Master Aldwin dismisses him from the yard and reports him to the guild as unreliable. No other yard in Bristol will hire him. The message is clear. Accept the danger or find another trade. But you're 4 months in now, with injuries that mark you as rope yard damaged goods. Your lungs carry tar fume residue. Your hands are so scarred they'd be useless for fine work. Your back has developed the characteristic hunch of rope walkers. You're already being molded into someone who has no choice but to continue. That night, lying in the loft with Geoffrey's salve on your latest burns and the memory of William's death fresh in your mind, you understand the final trap. It's not just that the work is dangerous. It's that acknowledging the danger, trying to improve safety, or advocating for better conditions is itself dangerous to your employment. You're expected to accept risk as natural, inevitable, God's will. To do otherwise is to mark yourself as unsuitable for the trade. You close your eyes and try to sleep, but your dreams are full of breaking yarns and the sound like bowstrings snapping, and you wake gasping with the certainty that someday, probably sooner than you'd like, you'll learn firsthand what William learned. That in the rope maker's yard, your life is worth less than the cable you're making. The work continues tomorrow. The danger continues tomorrow. The dying, occasional but inevitable, continues tomorrow. And you'll be there because what else can you do? 6 months into your apprenticeship, you experience your first quality inspection from a royal purchasing agent, and you discover that the physical dangers of rope making are almost quaint compared to the economic terror of having your work judged by someone who can destroy Master Aldwin's livelihood, and yours by extension with a single word: insufficient. The inspection is announced 3 days in advance, which sends the entire yard into a frenzy of preparation that makes normal work look relaxed by comparison. Every inch of rope in progress gets examined with paranoid intensity. Fiber quality that would normally pass without comment is rejected and reprocessed. Workers who usually complete tasks in reasonable time are suddenly expected to achieve perfection at double speed. Master Aldwin transforms from merely demanding into something approaching tyrannical. His Majesty's Navy, Aldwin announces to the assembled workers, requires cordage for 3 new ships. This contract is worth more than this yard earns in 6 months. The agent arrives Friday. Every rope, and I mean every single bloody rope, better be perfect or I'll know whose wages to dock. Perfect. In rope making, these are contradictory concepts. Rope is made from plant fiber twisted together by tired workers using their imperfect bodies. Perfect rope doesn't exist. But for the next 3 days, you're all expected to pretend it does. The preparation work falls hardest on the apprentices. Naturally, you're assigned to reheckling 300 pounds of fiber that was already hecked once. The logic, such as it is, holds that double-processed fiber will be more uniform. The reality is that your hands, which had started developing some protective callousing, are torn open again by the metal spikes. By the second day, you're leaving blood traces on the hemp, which means you have to clean each batch thoroughly after processing it, which doubles your work time, which means you're working until midnight to meet quota. Jeffrey, working beside you, mutters a steady stream of profanity under his breath. "It's all theater," he says quietly. The agent can't actually tell the difference between single and double-hecked fiber in finished rope. But Aldwin has to appear to be doing everything possible to achieve quality. It's about the performance of excellence rather than actual excellence. Then why are we destroying our hands for theater? You ask. Because Aldwin's theater requires real blood, Jeffrey replies. Ours specifically. The morning of the inspection, the yard is transformed. The dirt floors have been swept until they're almost smooth. Tools are arranged in neat rows. Works in progress are displayed prominently. Even the preservation station has been cleaned, which you'd have thought impossible. John the Tar looks disturbed by the whole thing, like someone violated his personal disaster space. The royal agent arrives at mid-morning with 2 assistants and an expression of profound boredom. His name is Sir Edmund Copley, and he's a minor nobleman who's apparently inspected rope yards throughout England. He wears fine wool and leather that cost more than your entire extended family will earn in their lifetimes, and he walks through the yard like a man touring a particularly uninteresting prison. Master Aldwin follows him like an anxious dog, gesturing, explaining, highlighting. Note the quality of our fiber, Sir Edmund. Italian hemp, the finest available. Our preservation techniques are unmatched in Bristol. Our workers are the most experienced. Sir Edmund mostly ignores him, occasionally stopping to examine something closely. He picks up a bundle of prepared fiber, holds it to the light, tests its strength with a sharp tug. He runs his hands along a finished rope, feeling for inconsistencies. At one point, he actually sniffs a preserved rope, which seems excessive but apparently tells him something. You're stationed with the other apprentices along the wall, trying to be invisible. The instruction was clear. Stand quietly, look industrious, don't speak unless spoken to. You watch Sir Edmund progress through the yard, and you notice something interesting. His assistants are doing the real inspection. One is making notes on a wax tablet. The other is testing rope samples with various weights and measuring devices. Sir Edmund himself seems to be performing his own kind of theater, the bored aristocrat forced to attend to tedious commercial matters. The inspection proceeds through the preparation sheds, the rope walk, the preservation station. At each stop, Sir Edmund asks questions that Aldwin answers with rehearsed enthusiasm. How long has this batch been retting? What's your tar mixture composition? What breaking strength can you guarantee? Aldwin has answers ready, though you notice he's carefully vague on specifics. The guild's secrets remain secret even during royal inspection. Then Sir Edmund reaches the testing area, where finished ropes are strength tested before delivery. This is where theory meets reality, and you can see Aldwin's anxiety spike. The agent selects several ropes at random, a thin rigging line, a medium hawser, and a thick mooring cable. His assistants set up the testing apparatus, a wooden frame with hooks and a pulley system that allows progressively heavier weights to be suspended from the rope until it breaks. We'll start with the rigging line, Sir Edmund announces. Standard test, 3 times the rated load capacity. If it holds, it passes. If it fails, he doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't need to. One of the assistants attaches the rigging line to the frame. The other begins adding weights, iron discs that clank ominously as they're threaded onto the testing hook. 50 pounds. 100. 150. The rope creaks but holds. 200 pounds. The rope is visibly stressed now, stretched taut as a bowstring. 250 pounds. Everyone is holding their breath. You're watching the rope and simultaneously watching Master Aldwin, whose face has gone pale. This rope could have been made by any worker in the yard, possibly even with fiber you prepared. If it fails, it's not just a failed test, it's a public demonstration of inadequacy. The rope holds. Sir Edmund nods, and his assistant makes a note. Acceptable. Next. The hawser goes through similar testing. This one is thicker, rated for higher loads. The weights climb, 300 pounds, 500, 700. The rope stretches, the fibers strain, and you swear you can hear individual threads protesting. At 900 pounds, there's a sound like a gunshot, and your heart stops. But it's not the rope failing, just the testing frame settling under the load. The rope holds. Another note made. Then comes the mooring cable, the thick 2-inch monster that's meant to hold ships against harbor currents and wind. This is the same type of cable you were working on when William died, and the memory makes your stomach clench. The assistants attach it to a reinforced testing frame designed for heavy loads. The weights begin accumulating. 500 pounds, 1,000, 1,500. The cable barely seems to notice. 2,000 pounds. Now it's starting to stretch, the lay tightening as the strands compress against each other. 2,500 pounds. The entire testing frame is creaking, and you wonder if the frame will fail before the rope does. Sir Edmund watches impassively. At 3,000 pounds, he signals his assistants to stop. That's 3 times rated capacity, he says. Leave it loaded for 5 minutes. If it holds without significant stretch, it passes. 5 minutes has never felt longer. The cable hangs there, 3,000 pounds of iron weights suspended from twisted plant fiber, and everyone in the yard is mentally inspecting every inch of it, looking for the weak spot that will fail and ruin everything. You find yourself praying again, bargaining with God. Let this rope hold and I'll never complain about the work again. Empty promises, but sincere in the moment. The cable holds. 5 minutes pass. Sir Edmund examines the stretch with a measuring stick, nods, signals his assistants to remove the weights. Acceptable, he says, and the relief in the yard is almost physical. But the inspection isn't over. Sir Edmund now moves to examining the work in progress, the ropes currently being made. This is where things get dangerous because work in progress reveals technique, and technique reveals both skill and potential flaws. He stops at a rope walk station where a team is laying a hawser. The walkers are mid-stride, moving backward in their synchronized dance, feeding fiber, maintaining tension. Sir Edmund watches for perhaps 30 seconds, and his expression shifts slightly. You can't read it clearly, but Master Aldwin apparently can, because he's suddenly more anxious than before. "Stop!" Sir Edmund says quietly. The workers freeze. The jack operator stops cranking. Everyone looks confused and terrified. Sir Edmund approaches the developing rope, examining it closely. He points to a section about 20 feet back. "There. See that? The lay is uneven. One strand is tighter than the others. Subtle, but it's there. In use, this would create a weak point. The rope would fail prematurely, possibly catastrophically." Aldwin moves forward, squinting at the indicated section. You can't see what Sir Edmund is pointing at from your position, but Aldwin's face suggests he sees it too, or at least, he's not willing to argue with a royal agent. "An anomaly, Sir Edmund, easily corrected. We'll unlay this section and—" "No need," Sir Edmund interrupts. "I'm not here to watch you repair work. I'm here to assess your standard quality. This rope suggests your quality control is inconsistent." He turns to his assistant. "Note: uneven laying observed in hawser production. Possible quality control issues." The assistant writes. Each scratch of his stylus on the wax tablet feels like a nail being driven into the yard's reputation. Master Aldwin is sweating now, despite the cool morning air. "Sir Edmund, with respect, one minor inconsistency in thousands of yards of rope hardly. One minor inconsistency that I observed in 5 minutes of watching," Sir Edmund corrects. "How many inconsistencies exist that I didn't observe? That's the question the Navy Board will ask." He pauses, letting this sink in. "I'm not failing your yard. Your test samples passed. But I'm noting concerns about process consistency. The board will factor this into their purchasing decisions and pricing. This is the economic guillotine falling. Not a complete failure, but a noted concern. The Navy will still buy rope from Aldwin's yard, but at reduced prices or reduced volume, which means reduced profits, which means cost-cutting elsewhere, which means, inevitably, reduced wages or increased quotas for workers who are already stretched to breaking. The inspection concludes an hour later with a written assessment that Aldwin must sign. You don't see the full document, but you hear the summary Sir Edmund provides. Materials adequate, test samples acceptable, preservation techniques satisfactory, process consistency questionable. Approved for Navy Board consideration with noted reservations. After Sir Edmund and his entourage depart, Master Aldwin stands in the center of the yard, holding the assessment document, his face cycling through emotions, relief that he wasn't completely rejected, fury at the noted concerns, calculation about what this means for his profits. Then he explodes. Who was working the hawser station this morning? Who was responsible for that uneven lay? Thomas steps forward, because he's the senior journeyman and the buck stops with him. "I was supervising, Master. The work was inadequate," Aldwin shouts. "Inadequate enough that a royal agent noticed it in 5 minutes. Do you understand what this costs me? Every rope the Navy purchases this year will be at reduced rate because of noted quality concerns. That's thousands of pounds in lost revenue. Master, the lay was within acceptable. Acceptable isn't good enough when royal agents are watching. Perfection is the standard when our reputation is at stake." Aldwin is working himself into a rage now, the kind that usually precedes someone being dismissed or severely punished. "I want the name of every worker on that station. they'll have a week's wages docked. And you, Thomas, you're responsible for quality control. Consider yourself demoted to senior apprentice wages for the next month. This is collective punishment, medieval style. It doesn't matter who actually created the inconsistency. Everyone associated with the work suffers. Thomas's face goes carefully blank. The expression of someone who's furious but knows showing it will make things worse. The other workers named are similarly stone-faced. You're grateful you weren't directly involved, but the lesson is clear. Royal inspection can destroy your economic life even if you haven't technically failed. The standard isn't good enough or even excellent. It's absolutely flawless under the most critical scrutiny possible. And that standard is being enforced not through training or support, but through financial punishment. The rest of the day proceeds in grim silence. Workers move through their tasks with mechanical precision, everyone terrified of being the next person to draw Aldwin's wrath. The atmosphere is poisonous, and you realize this is another hidden cost of the quality control system. It sets workers against each other. Everyone becomes hypervigilant about everyone else's work, because one person's mistake costs the whole team. At the evening meal, Thomas sits at the apprentice end of the table, his demotion making him unwelcome among the journeymen. He eats in silence, staring at nothing. Finally, Jeffrey leans over. "It wasn't your fault," he says quietly. "The inconsistency could have been from fiber variation, from environmental humidity, from a dozen factors outside your control." Thomas looks at him with tired eyes. Doesn't matter whose fault it was. Matters that Aldwin needs someone to blame, and I'm convenient. He pauses. This is how the system works. Master protects his profits by punishing workers for factors beyond their control. We accept it because refusing means dismissal, and around it goes. "Could you appeal to the guild?" You ask, knowing even as you say it that it's a naive question. Thomas almost smiles. The guild? The guild exists to protect Master's interests. They'll side with Aldwin every time. My only recourse is to accept the punishment, work harder, hope to regain my position eventually. He stands, leaving most of his food uneaten. Welcome to quality control, boys, where perfection is mandatory and accountability flows downward only. That night, you lie awake thinking about Sir Edmund's inspection. The man spent perhaps 3 hours in the yard, tested 3 ropes, watched one work session for 5 minutes, and made notes that will affect everyone's livelihoods for months. The power differential is staggering. His casual observations become judgments that ripple through the entire economic structure of the yard. Historians still argue whether medieval quality guilds actually maintained higher standards or simply created artificial scarcity to inflate prices. Having watched this inspection, you suspect it's mostly the latter. The testing seemed genuine, but the criticism of process inconsistency, based on 5 minutes of observation, feels arbitrary, more about demonstrating power than actually assessing quality. But it doesn't matter what you suspect. Sir Edmund's word carries the weight of royal authority, and Master Aldwin's profits depend on not challenging that authority. So workers get blamed, wages get docked, and everyone learns the lesson. Your best work might not be good enough, and whether it's good enough depends on the momentary judgment of people who've never twisted a fiber in their lives. You drift towards sleep, and your dreams are filled with testing frames and breaking ropes and Sir Edmund's bored aristocratic face watching you fail at tasks you didn't know you were being judged on. When you wake, the morning bell is already ringing, and it's time to make more rope that might or might not be good enough for people who'll never know your name. The work continues. The standards remain impossible. The punishments remain arbitrary. And you keep twisting fiber because what else can you do? 8 months into your apprenticeship, you finally understand the economic mathematics of your situation. And the numbers are even more depressing than the physical reality. It starts when Master Aldwin posts the quarterly accounts in the common room. He's required by guild rules to show apprentices and journeymen a summary of yard finances, though you quickly realize the summary is carefully curated to show exactly what he wants you to see and nothing more. You're studying the posted parchment with Jeffrey and Peter during the brief window after evening meal when Edmund joins you, and he's the one who starts translating the numbers into reality. See this line? Edmund points to an entry reading apprentice maintenance. £12, 8 shillings. That's what Aldwin claims it costs to house and feed all 8 apprentices for 3 months. That's about 7 shillings per apprentice per month. That seems reasonable. You venture, having no reference point for medieval economics. Edmund snorts. It's rubbish accounting. A single apprentice eats maybe 2 shillings worth of food per month. Basic grains, occasional meat, beer. Housing costs him nothing because we sleep in a loft he already owned. He's claiming triple the actual cost, which means he's pocketing the difference. Jeffrey nods, pointing to another line. And here, fiber costs £45. That's actually accurate, probably. But look at this. Finished rope sales, £320. He's selling rope for 7 times what the raw materials cost, and the only expense between raw fiber and finished rope is labor. Our labor, which he's paying minimally or not at all. You do some mental arithmetic, and the reality crystallizes. So he's paying 8 apprentices essentially nothing, paying maybe 15 journeymen actual wages, and clearing hundreds of pounds in profit per quarter? Welcome to capitalism, medieval style, Peter says dryly. The master owns the means of production, the rope walk, the tools, the space. We own nothing but our labor, which he purchases at the lowest possible rate. He assumes all the business risk, true, but he also captures all the profit. We get subsistence wages while he gets rich. This shouldn't be a revelation. You've known abstractly that Master Aldwin profits from your work, but seeing it quantified is different. You're working 12-hour days, destroying your body, breathing toxic fumes, risking death or maiming, and your labor generates profits you'll never see. You're compensated with barely enough food to survive and a loft space that costs Aldwin nothing. What about when we become journeymen? You ask. The wages improve, right? Edmund pulls out a scrap of parchment and starts calculating. A journeyman makes maybe £24 per year. Sounds good until you account for expenses. Guild dues, £2. Tools and equipment maintenance, £1. Rent for actual housing because you can't live in the apprentice loft anymore, £6. Food now that you're buying it yourself, £8. Clothing, medical care, everything else, another £5. You're left with maybe £2 per year in actual discretionary income, and that's if nothing goes wrong. And things always go wrong, Jeffrey adds. You get injured, you need the barber surgeon, that's half your annual discretionary income gone. Your tools break, you need replacements, there goes the rest. A journeyman lives only marginally better than an apprentice, just with the illusion of wages and the burden of expenses. What about becoming a master? You ask, though you're starting to suspect the answer. Peter laughs bitterly. To become a master, you need to buy into the guild. Current rate is about £50 plus you need to demonstrate you can run a yard independently, which means either buying an existing yard or building one. Total capital required, minimum £100. A journeyman saving aggressively might save £2 per year. That's 50 years to accumulate enough capital, except you're also aging, your body's degrading from the work, and expenses always exceed income. So it's impossible, you say flatly. Not impossible, Edmund corrects. Just impossible for people like us. The people who become masters are either master sons inheriting the business, or journeymen who marry masters' daughters and inherit that way, or the very rare individual who has outside capital, inheritance, wealthy patron, something. The guild structure ensures that the master class reproduces itself and the working class stays working. Jeffrey points to another line on the accounts. Here's the really insulting bit. Charity and alms, £3. Aldwin donates £3 per quarter to the church and gets to feel virtuous about it. That's more than he spends actually maintaining any individual apprentice, and it buys him social standing and the priest's endorsement. Medieval public relations. You study the numbers more carefully, and other patterns emerge. The line item for tool repair and replacement seems excessive given that you rarely see new tools. The building maintenance cost is substantial for a structure that's clearly not being maintained well. The roof leaks, the floors are uneven, the preservation shed is practically derelict. You start to suspect that Aldwin is inflating expenses on paper to minimize his apparent profit, probably for tax or guild assessment purposes. He's cooking the books, you say slowly. Of course he is, Peter replies. Every master does. The guild knows, the town authorities know, everyone knows. But the system depends on masters underreporting profits because if the true profit margins were public, workers might start asking uncomfortable questions about why they're compensated so poorly. This conversation is interrupted by Thomas, who's been listening from nearby. His month of demotion to apprentice wages has just ended, and he's bitter in ways he wasn't before. You want to know the real economics? He says, joining your huddle. I've been tracking my own productivity. On a good day, I personally contribute to making about 80 yards of finished rope. That rope sells for roughly 4 shillings per yard, 320 shillings total, or £16. My daily wage as a journeyman is about 2 shillings. So I generate £16 of value and receive 2 shillings in compensation. That's the extraction rate of, he calculates mentally, 99%. Aldwin captures 99% of the value I create. That can't be sustainable, you protest. If everyone realized. Everyone does realize, Thomas interrupts. We're not stupid. We know we're being exploited. But what are our options? Refuse to work? We starve. Aldwin hires replacements within a week. Nothing changes except we're dead or destitute. Form a workers' coalition? The guild would crush it immediately as conspiracy against the natural order. Leave and start our own yard? We lack capital, guild connections, and customers. The system is designed to be inescapable. Edmund speaks up again. My father was a journeyman rope maker, worked 40 years in the trade, died at 53, his lungs destroyed, his hands crippled, his back bent. Know what he left my mother and sisters. 14 shillings and a box of broken tools. 40 years of labor, and his total accumulated wealth was 14 shillings. The master he worked for built a second house and married his daughters to minor gentry. The silence that follows is heavy with recognition. You're all seeing your futures. Decades of brutal work, bodies systematically destroyed, compensation barely sufficient for survival, all while the masters accumulate wealth that compounds across generations. The apprenticeship isn't training, it's indoctrination into accepting this as natural and inevitable. Why doesn't anyone rebel? You finally ask. If everyone knows the system is rigged, why do we participate? Jeffrey answers with the weariness of someone who's had this realization before. Because the alternative is starvation. Because the church preaches that social hierarchy is God's will and rebellion is sin. Because the guild has legal authority to punish workers who organize. Because individual resistance is crushed while collective resistance can't form when everyone's too exhausted and desperate to organize. The system doesn't continue because it's good. It continues because it's successfully made itself the only option. That night you can't sleep. The numbers keep running through your head. 7 years of apprenticeship generating profits you'll never see. Then potentially decades as a journeyman. working yourself to death while creating wealth for someone else. The vanishingly small chance of ever accumulating enough capital to escape the labor class. The certainty that your body will be destroyed in the process regardless. You think about William, who died at 32 having saved toward buying into the guild. His accumulated wealth disappearing into funeral costs and debts. You think about John the Tarrer, slowly poisoning himself with lead and tar for a few extra pennies per week. You think about Thomas, demoted and punished for factors outside his control, his month's wages stolen to protect Aldwin's profit margins. The economic system is even more brutal than the physical work. At least with physical brutality, you can see the injuries, understand the cause and effect. Economic brutality is invisible, hidden behind accounting entries and guild regulations and market forces that somehow always work to benefit masters while impoverishing workers. Around you, other apprentices snore in exhausted sleep. Peter mutters something in his dreams, probably nightmares about work, since that's what fills everyone's sleeping hours. Jeffrey shifts on his pallet, his breathing labored from months of tar fume exposure. Edmund's hands twitch, still making rope-twisting motions even in unconsciousness. These are your people now. Not by choice, but by circumstance and the economic structures that have sorted you into the laboring class and locked the doors behind you. You're bound together not by friendship, though some friendship exists, but by shared exploitation, by the common understanding that you're all being ground down to generate profits for people who'll never know your names. Historians still argue whether medieval workers were better or worse off than modern ones, whether the guild system represented proto-union protection or proto-capitalist exploitation. Lying here, doing the mathematics of your own impoverishment, you know which side of that debate your experience supports. The guilds aren't worker organizations, they're master organizations that control labor supply, suppress wages, and ensure the economic status quo reproduces itself generation after generation. The morning bell will ring in a few hours. You'll wake exhausted, eat inadequate food, and work another 12-hour day creating wealth you'll never possess. Your body will deteriorate slightly more. Your hands will acquire new injuries. You'll breathe more toxic fumes and risk more catastrophic accidents. And at the end of it, Master Aldwin will be marginally richer while you'll be marginally closer to the early grave that awaits most rope workers. This is the reality that the quarterly accounts revealed. You're not learning a trade that will provide a comfortable life. You're being consumed. Your youth, your health, your labor, your very life, as fuel for someone else's prosperity. The apprenticeship contract isn't a path to advancement. It's a legal mechanism to extract maximum value from your body before it breaks. You finally drift towards sleep as dawn approaches, and your dreams are filled with columns of numbers. Endless accounts where your life's value is calculated in shillings and found wanting. When you wake, the numbers will still be true, the exploitation will still be real, and the work will still be waiting. But at least now you understand exactly how little your suffering is worth in pounds, shillings, and pence. It's a cold comfort, but it's the only comfort available in a system designed to give you nothing else. A full year into your apprenticeship, you finally understand why this job breaks people in ways that go beyond physical injury or economic exploitation. It's a Tuesday morning, unremarkable in every way, when you're working the preparation shed and you realize you can't remember what your hands looked like before. Not just the current state of scar tissue and chemical stains. You literally cannot recall the appearance of your own unmarked skin. The person you were 12 months ago is gone, and the person you're becoming is something you never chose to be. Jeffrey notices you staring at your hands during the water break. He's in his 6th year now, close enough to journeyman status that he's started calculating his future in concrete terms rather than abstract hope. He sits beside you on the fiber bales, and his own hands, gnarled and scarred and permanently curved from years of gripping tools, rest on his knees like strange artifacts. "I used to play the lute," he says quietly. It's the first time you've heard him mention anything from before the rope yard. Nothing professional, just for enjoyment. My mother taught me when I was young. I was actually quite good. He flexes his fingers, and you can hear the joints cracking. Haven't touched one in 4 years. Can't make the finger positions anymore. The scarring's too thick, the joints don't bend right, and I've lost the fine motor control. Why did you come here? You ask. If you had other skills. My father died, Jeffrey says simply. Family needed income. The rope yard was hiring apprentices, and the contract included room and board, which meant one less mouth for my mother to feed at home. I was 14, thought it would be temporary, that I'd serve my 7 years and then move on to something better. Except there is no something better once rope making has had you. You're marked, literally and figuratively. He's right, and you know it. Your body is being permanently altered by this work. Your hands will never be suitable for fine craftsmanship. Your lungs carry damage from tar fumes that no amount of recovery time will fully heal. Your back has developed the characteristic curve of rope walkers who spend years moving backward down the long shed. You're being transformed into a specialized creature that can survive in the rope yard environment because it's become incapable of surviving anywhere else. Peter joins the conversation, overhearing. He's been quieter lately, more withdrawn, and you've noticed he's lost weight despite eating the same rations as everyone else. My brother's a clerk, he says, works for a wool merchant in London, sits at a desk, writes in ledgers, goes home to an actual house with an actual family. I see him maybe once a year when he visits. Last time, he looked at my hands and actually flinched, couldn't hide it. I saw the pity in his eyes and worse, the relief that it was me here and not him. Could you join him? You ask. Learn clerking. Peter holds up his ruined hands. With these, I can barely hold a quill properly anymore. My handwriting, which used to be decent, now looks like a child's scrawl because my fingers don't articulate correctly. And even if I could write, who would hire me? I'm a rope maker. That's all I am now. That's all I'll ever be. This is the psychological trap that complements the physical and economic ones. The work doesn't just destroy your body and steal your labor, it destroys your sense of possibility. You start your apprenticeship thinking it's a phase, a stepping stone, a way to learn a trade that will provide options. You end it, those who make it to the end, understanding that you've been permanently categorized, permanently limited, permanently reduced to this single function. Edmund appears and he's got news. Master Aldwin's daughter is getting married, he announces. Big celebration planned. 3-day festival. And we're all required to attend and look grateful for the privilege. Who's she marrying? Jeffrey asks. Peter Thornton's son. The Thornton who owns the shipyard. Edmund's expression is sardonic. So Aldwin's tying his rope business to the shipyard's purchasing power. Smart business move. Meanwhile, we'll stand in the yard and cheer while they consolidate their wealth and power. The wedding festival, when it happens a week later, is a study in medieval social stratification made visible. The actual ceremony is in the church, reserved for family and important guild members. The celebration afterwards spills into the rope yard, which has been cleaned and decorated beyond recognition. There are tables laden with food, actual meat, fresh bread, cheese, fruit, things you haven't seen in months. But the tables are arranged hierarchically. The masters and their families at the high table, the journeymen at secondary tables, and the apprentices standing along the walls, allowed to eat only after everyone else has finished. You watch Master Aldwin give his daughter away, beaming with paternal pride and merchant calculation. You watch her new husband, a young man who's never twisted a fiber in his life, but who now has access to guaranteed rope supply for his family's ships. You watch the masters toast and laugh and plan business arrangements disguised as social pleasantries. And you stand against the wall with your ruined hands and your scarred lungs and your broken body, and you understand that you're here as decoration, as evidence of Aldwin's commercial success, as living proof that he runs a productive yard. We're props, Peter mutters beside you. Literally, we're being displayed like the bales of hemp or the coils of finished rope. Evidence of his wealth and power. An older journeyman named Robert overhears and adds his perspective. He's 47, which makes him ancient by rope yard standards. I attended Master Aldwin's wedding 30 years ago. Stood right where you're standing. Same ceremony, same displays of wealth, same hierarchies. I was an apprentice then, full of hope that I'd someday be at the high table. Now I'm a journeyman, still eating the scraps, still watching masters celebrate while we wait for permission to feed ourselves. You never became a master? You ask, though you already know the answer. Never accumulated the capital. Never married a master's daughter. Never received an inheritance. Just worked and aged and survived. And now I'm too old and broken to do anything else. This is my life. This yard, this work, this position at the secondary table. This is all I'll ever have. The celebration continues for 3 days, as promised. 3 days of watching other people eat well, drink freely, and enjoy themselves while you work, because the rope making doesn't stop for a wedding. Orders still need fulfilling, contracts still demand completion. The apprentices and junior journeymen maintain production while the senior workers at least get to attend the festivities more fully. On the 3rd day, exhausted from working extended shifts to cover for the celebration, you make a mistake. You're operating a jack, maintaining the twist on a naval cable, and your attention lapses for just a moment. The fiber feeds unevenly. The twist becomes inconsistent. By the time Thomas notices and corrects it, you've created about 20 feet of substandard rope that will have to be unworked and redone. Thomas is furious, but more than that, he's disappointed. You know better than this, he says. You're a year in. You should be past novice errors. I'm exhausted, you say, which is true but not an acceptable excuse. We're all exhausted. We're always exhausted. That's not a reason to produce inferior work. Thomas examines the damaged section. This is coming out of your already non-existent wages, and you'll redo it on your own time. Your own time. The concept is almost funny. You work 12 hours per day. You sleep maybe 6 hours, interrupted by injury pain and work anxiety. The remaining 6 hours are filled with eating, basic hygiene, and mandatory attendance at things like masters' daughters' weddings. You have no own time to sacrifice, but you redo the work anyway, staying up past midnight to unlay the bad rope and relay it correctly. Your hands shake with fatigue. Your eyes keep trying to close. And while you work alone in the dimly lit rope walk, you can hear the distant sounds of the celebration still continuing. The masters and their guests laughing and drinking while you fix your mistake in darkness. This is when something inside you breaks in a different way than physical breaking. Not your body, though that's plenty broken. Not your economic hope, which died months ago. Something deeper, your sense that any of this has meaning or purpose beyond simple survival. You're not learning a valuable trade. You're not building toward a better future. You're just existing day after day, in a system designed to extract everything you have while giving back the minimum required to keep you functional enough to extract more. Jeffrey finds you around 2 a.m., still working on the repair. He doesn't say anything, just sits nearby keeping you company. After a while, he speaks. I'm going to make journeyman in 6 months, he says. You'd think I'd be excited, but mostly I'm just tired. Tired and aware that journeyman status just means a different form of the same exploitation. I'll make wages, true, but I'll also have expenses that consume those wages. I'll have slightly more respect, but I'll still be property of this yard in every way that matters. I'll work until my body gives out completely, and then I'll either die or become one of those broken former rope makers you see begging near the docks. Why keep going, you ask, if it's all so pointless? Because the alternative is immediate death or destitution rather than slow death and destitution. Because I've invested too much suffering to give up now. That's the sunk cost fallacy made flesh. Because I genuinely don't know what else to do. This is my life. This is all I have. He pauses. And because some days, just some days, there's a moment when a rope comes together perfectly, when the twist is exactly right and the lay is beautiful, and I remember why I thought this trade might be worth learning. Those moments are rare, but they exist. You finish the repair around 3 a.m. The rope is correct now, properly laid, acceptable by even royal inspection standards. You've sacrificed sleep and physical comfort and your own minimal free time to fix a mistake caused by exhaustion from working extended hours to cover a celebration you weren't truly invited to attend. The mathematics of exploitation couldn't be clearer. Morning comes too soon. The bell rings. Your body, running on 3 hours of sleep, protests movement. But you rise anyway because not rising means discipline, docked wages, possibly dismissal. You stumble to the preparation shed and begin processing hemp, your hands moving through familiar motions while your mind floats somewhere else. Historians still argue whether medieval workers had more autonomy than modern ones, whether the slower pace of pre-industrial life meant less alienation from labor. You think you could contribute meaningfully to that debate now. The pace isn't slower, it's relentless, 12 hours daily, 6 days weekly, for 7 years minimum. The autonomy is non-existent. You work when told, how told, on what you're told, with no input into conditions or compensation. The alienation is total. You don't own your tools, your workspace, your product, or even your own time. You own nothing but your increasingly damaged body, and even that's mortgaged to the apprentice contract. Peter doesn't show up for work that morning. Turns out he collapsed in the loft and can't be roused. The barber surgeon is summoned, at Peter's future expense, and diagnoses exhaustion compounded by probable malnutrition. He prescribes rest and better food, which would be funny if it weren't tragic. Rest and better food, the two things an apprentice rope maker cannot access. Master Aldwin, still in a generous mood from the wedding celebration, allows Peter 2 days of recovery. 2 days. Then back to work or face dismissal for breach of contract. Is presented as mercy, and compared to immediate dismissal, perhaps it is. But it's the mercy of a system that grinds people down and then occasionally pauses the grinding long enough to let them partially recover before grinding resumes. You visit Peter in the loft during the midday break. He's awake but weak, his face pale, his body trembling. "I don't think I'm going to make it," he says quietly. 6 more years of this. I don't think I have 6 more years in me. You want to reassure him, but you can't find honest reassurance. So you sit with him in silence, 2 young men being systematically destroyed by a system that calls itself education and improvement and guild tradition but is really just organized exploitation dressed in medieval ceremony. That evening, during the meal, Edmund shares information he got from a journeyman who worked in London. "The yards there are worse," he says. "Longer hours, lower pay, more accidents. Apparently Bristol yards are considered relatively good." "This is relatively good?" you say. Edmund shrugs. "Relatively," which tells you everything about the state of the trade overall. The conversation drifts to escape fantasies. What would you do if you could leave, if you had money and freedom and an undamaged body? The answers are telling. Geoffrey wants to play lute again. Edmund wants to open a small shop selling rope to individual customers rather than working for a master. Peter wants to simply rest, to sleep for days without the morning bell, to live without constant pain. Your own fantasy, you realize, is modest beyond belief. You want hands that don't hurt, lungs that breathe clearly, and the freedom to choose what you do with your days. These are not ambitious dreams. They're basic human desires for comfort, health, and autonomy. The fact that they're completely inaccessible fantasies tells you everything about your position in the medieval social hierarchy. Thomas stops by the apprentice table, making his rounds. Peter's returning to work day after tomorrow, he announces. Master's orders. He'll be on light duty for a week. Preparation shed work. No jack operation. He's not ready, you protest. Doesn't matter. Contract requires work unless physically incapable, and the barber surgeon says he's capable. Thomas's expression suggests he doesn't like this any more than you do, but he's not the one making decisions. This is how it works. You work until you literally cannot work, and then you work some more, and then eventually you either recover or you don't. Peter will probably be fine. Probably. Your friend's health and life balanced on probably, because the economic logic of the rope yard demands continuous labor regardless of human cost. That night, you lie awake thinking about everything you've learned this year. The physical brutality of the work, the economic mathematics of exploitation, the social hierarchies made visible at weddings and inspections. The way the system grinds people down and then extracts more grinding because the alternative is starvation. The permanent physical damage that marks you as rope yard property. The destruction of possibilities and the narrowing of futures until there's only this. Making rope until you die or become too broken to continue. You think about William, dead from a breaking yarn. About John the Tarrer, slowly poisoning himself with lead. About Robert, 47, and still eating at the secondary table. About Peter, collapsed from exhaustion and malnutrition. About Thomas, punished for factors beyond his control. About Jeffrey, who used to play lute and now has hands that barely function. And you think about yourself 1 year in, 6 to go if you survive. Your hands already ruined. Your lungs already damaged. Your back already curving. Your options already eliminated. Your future already written. More rope, more injuries, more exploitation, until eventually you're too broken to continue and the system discards you for younger, less damaged labor. This is why you wouldn't last a day in a medieval rope maker's yard. Not because any single day is impossible to survive. You've survived 365 of them now. But because truly understanding what you're surviving, truly seeing the system that's consuming you, makes continued survival feel less like achievement and more like defeat. You're not winning by lasting. You're just losing slowly. The work will continue tomorrow. Your body will deteriorate slightly more. The profits you generate will flow to people who'll never know your name. And 6 years from now, if you survive, you'll be a journeyman with the privilege of being exploited at slightly higher wages until your body fails completely. This is the craft. This is the mystery. This is the ancient tradition of the Rope Makers Guild. This is what breaks people. Not the work itself, but the understanding that the work will never end, never improve, never lead anywhere except to more work until you can't work anymore. You close your eyes and wait for sleep that won't come easily, and you know that tomorrow, when the bell rings, you'll rise and work anyway, because you've invested too much suffering to stop, because you don't know how to be anything except what this place is making you, because the trap has closed completely, and there's no escape except through 6 more years of grinding or through death, whichever comes first. Welcome to the rope yard. You've lasted a year. Only 6 more to go. And now, as we near the end of this journey through hemp dust and tar fumes, let your mind drift away from the rope walk. Feel yourself floating back from that cramped loft, from those scarred hands, from the endless backward walking and the chemical burns and the calculations of exploitation. You're safe now, here in your own space, far from Master Aldwin's yard and the medieval world that ground people down so efficiently. The rope makers of history, the real ones, not our imagined apprentice, were indeed people who endured conditions we can barely fathom today. Their hands told stories of decades of damage. Their lungs carried the residue of preservation chemicals. Their bodies bent into the shapes demanded by their tools and tasks. They existed in economic systems that extracted everything while giving back subsistence. And yet they persisted day after day because humans are remarkably resilient, remarkably capable of surviving what shouldn't be survivable. But tonight, you don't have to survive anything except drifting into comfortable sleep. Your hands are whole. Your lungs breathe easily. You're not bound by apprentice contracts or guild regulations. The morning bell won't ring to pull you from rest into 12 hours of brutal labor. You're free in ways our medieval rope makers never were. So let the details of their world fade now. Let the specific injuries blur. Let the mathematics of exploitation become just numbers that don't apply to you. Feel the comfort of your bed, the safety of your space, the peaceful darkness that holds no tar kettles or breaking yarns or endless backward walks. Let sleep come gently, naturally, without the interference of pain or anxiety or the dread of tomorrow's quota. The rope makers did their work. Their ropes held ships and rang bells and built cathedrals. Their suffering wasn't meaningless, even if it was unjust. And now, centuries later, we can honor them by understanding their reality while being grateful we don't share it. Rest easy. Dream peacefully. The morning will come softly, without bells, without masters, without hemp dust filling your lungs. You're safe. You're comfortable. You're free to simply sleep. Good night.